Good evening, everybody. All right, it's time for the Hot Takes Part 2 roundtable. As always, with me is my co-host, Mike.
Yo.
And returning from the last Hot Takes stream would be Snarboo.
Hello, hello.
And Kate.
Hola.
And I see Prime's already here.
Hey, man. Well,
So, managed to make it in early. Cool. All right. So, before we go ahead and jump into the whole thing, I just have to say that this almost didn't happen, actually. Well, at least not tonight. I was at my first con in a year today. That was Free Play Florida. And it was a pretty fun time. I got to play a lot of arcade games I either have never seen in person or haven't played in 30, 40 years. Bought some cool stuff. Met some people, some pretty cool people like John Riggs, for example. And
cool.
yeah, and also got to see a lot of cool pinball tables too. Got to play the Rush one, which is just great. And yeah, they had some classic consoles set up, some candy cabs, things like that. And there were some panels and stuff, but I wasn't able to make it to any of those. But Betty went as well, and we had fun. We also had traffic on the way back. We got stuck in for about an hour, which I was thinking, I don't know if we're gonna make it home in time to get this going, you know. But regardless, we made it, and here we are. So, where shall we begin? I know you enjoyed our hot takes last time. At least I hope you enjoyed our hot takes last time. So why don't we start?
Yeah, because we got more. That's kind of the point of why we're here tonight.
Yeah. So, but before we do that, why don't we take a look at the new background? Had to change it up, you know. Yeah,
I see that.
This is the first time you guys have seen the completed one. What do you think?
Let me see. Make sure that
I see you have a family. You have the famous host of Family Feud. His name escapes me at the moment.
Steve Harvey.
Yes.
Looking all cross-eyed.
I recognize
Treasure
very
Master.
little in this.
Well,
I recognize Treasure Master.
Yep.
I can't quite tell what the thing is to the right of stunned Mike Tyson and below the Mars person. If you can...
Why, Mike, you should be quite familiar with that.
Well, it should be, but it's not... it's
Why?
very...
It was your avatar during the Splatterhouse stream.
Oh, wait, it's the teddy bear. Okay. I thought it was something 8-bit. I see it now.
Hey, Great
no,
White North. And hey, Tim
Yeah,
Tim. And yes, they are intended to have their profile pics rotated.
Yep.
Just this, cobbled together an MS Paint background is just basically telling you that we're not taking this seriously. So it's kind of a bit of just a way to blow off steam with these hot takes.
Yeah.
And if everyone has fun listening to them, then great. So, and Mike, you should recognize what Schwarzenegger is saying to Snarboo there.
At least, yeah, you even have the blazed out Commander Jones to the right of upside down Pikachu.
Yes. And I figured you'd do well to have a kind of googly-eyed cat staring at you.
Yep.
Oh, but let's see. Now everyone can hear us okay, I hope.
I hope we can be heard okay.
Yes, same. There were some technical issues last time.
Yeah. Well, I can hear all you guys okay. Anyone out there listening? How do we sound?
Wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you, Prime. So, who wants to go first?
Can I volunteer Mike? Because I volunteer Mike.
Well, I second that, so.
All right, well.
So,
Do I
Mike,
start? Do I start with the older game, or do I start with the one that I'm sure we all want to talk about first?
Surprise us?
how about the older game?
Well, the older game I think is less defensible, and honestly, of the ones we're going to talk about tonight, I think it might be the shittiest on a
I mean,
objective level.
arguably, you know which games I chose, so
Yeah, well. Okay, well, this. Alright, I'll go with this. It was released on several consoles, I believe. Well, at least the NES and the Genesis. I had it for the NES. One of those titles I had growing up that I just didn't think to expel from my our collection, me and my brothers. That was probably one of the games he got for cheap at the old rental store that was getting rid of their NES inventory. So I never got rid of this one. I never really super hated it, but I know not a lot of people love it. It is a licensed Simpsons game, none other than Bart versus the Space Mutants, made by those geniuses at Imagineering, a video game company based out of New Jersey that I believe was a branch of Absolute Entertainment, company started up by Gary Kitchen and David Crane that made games, to be sure.
Wow, David Crane.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can believe it. The Pitfall guy had, I guess had a little more trouble staying relevant in the NES era. Then that doesn't sound nice.
On the NES, didn't he work on A Boy and His Blob?
Yes,
I
he
think
did.
Yes,
people tend
that
to
was
do
that was an Imagineering game, and relatively speaking, that was probably the best one they've ever done. Either that or Ghoul School.
All right.
Almost everything else, if I can just quickly glisten over their NES library. Ghostbusters 2, which was far worse than the game that Hal made. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, because that was sure a movie that got a game. Apparently a Barbie game on the NES, which I'm sure sucks. One based on Swamp Thing, and The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle on Game Boy? Just the Game Boy version? Didn't that come out to other... And
they might have ported it, if I had to guess.
Okay.
Let me look that up, though. I feel like their stink was all over the 16-bit versions.
Right. They're the fuckers who made Home Alone 2 its video game adaptations. Well, at least the NES and Game Boy ones. I'm not sure if they did the SNES one. God, I could never figure out how to beat the first stage in that fucking game until a really, really long time down the line. And then I learned, like, oh no, wait, this is the best it gets. Best, quote unquote. But for some reason, they had the Imagineering had the license to make games based on The Simpsons, a very increasingly popularizing property for its time. And this was all the way back in 91, where I guess the show was just still on season 2 or 3, if even that.
Speaking of which, if I could interject for a second.
Please do.
When I was at Free Play Florida, they actually had 2 Simpsons cabs.
Oh, very cool.
Nice.
Very cool.
Sweet.
Who's your favorite character to play as in that game?
I actually have to say it's either Bart or Lisa.
Yeah, Bart definitely has a fair advantage with his board, but
of course,
it's been so long since I played that.
We're talking about a good Simpsons game here. You're trying to talk about a bad one, so let's go.
A very bad one. Yeah, well, a pretty bad one. Honestly, there are worse ones, but yeah, Bart vs. the Space Mutants is a diddly-do thingamabob game where Space Mutants invade Springfield, and they get the idea that... What's that?
Zuh?
Woozle Wuzzle?
Is that what Pastor really came with these days?
Ladies and gentlemen, the Clown Show has been put on hiatus for retooling. I'm not gonna lie, part of the reason why I wanted to discuss this game was just so that Rob and I, and maybe also Snarb, could cram as many Simpsons references in as we possibly can in this early portion of the stream. But
Gotta get it
anyway.
out of the way.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, Bart vs. Space Mutants invade Springfield, and they have the cockamamie idea to power some sort of world domination device that, the thing is that this device keeps getting modified to take different mundane objects as power sources. Don't question the logic, it's deliberately stupid.
Bored.
Board license plates should have been one of the things. Well, that wasn't until season 5, or 6 even. Well, or around the Merkin years. Newt, Zach.
Wait, so is your opinion of this game positive or negative?
It is actually positive because.
Oh, really?
I grew up. It's mostly based out of dumb, I was a kid nostalgia. This is just one that I felt like playing a lot for whatever reason, because I don't even know what compelled me. I just, for the longest time, any time I just played it, which maybe I just played in the first place because it was a Simpsons game, I don't know. I just wanted to see if I could beat the first level somehow. And to its credit, the first level is easily the most involved and, dare I say, innovative part of the game. The alien device will be powered by purple objects, of which on the streets of Springfield there are many, and Bart has to... some he could just plain old spray paint some of these objects, for some reason, purple trash cans, but some of the... a good chunk of the objects require a little bit more intuition, purple, the Barney's Bolorama sign is purple when it's turned off, but if you light it up with a rocket, then it turns suddenly pink while it's active, so, that's one of the purple objects down, and, you need to topple a can of paint in, a purple flower pot. You need to prank call Mo, who is, for some reason, wearing purple in this game, and he looks just like one of the generic NPCs that walk by. Yeah, that's weird. It's almost... Oh,
I got a question.
Ahead.
I have a vague memory of this. It's been so long since I played the stupid game.
Sure.
Isn't there an object you have to cover up by knocking it off a clothesline, by walking on it?
Yeah, that was actually outside of Moe's bar. There's a purple, ball or whatever in a yard, and yes, you do have to walk in a clothesline. Bart automatically knocks off a piece of clothing to cover it up, and that's another purple object. I think you have to do, almost all of them. There is maybe a little bit of leeway that you can miss one or two, but otherwise, you need to try and get as many of them as you can before you can get to the end of the stage. And it's almost sort of like an adventure game in how it's laid out, except for the fact that at the same time it is also a platformer where Bart can only take 2 hits, and he only starts out with a few lives, and unfortunately there are no continues in this game. Roll my eyes, but I think you can actually, purchase some more lives at some point. Again, my own memories are...
I feel like that's in the first stage. The first stage is one of the only ones I remember where you actually had to buy items in order to complete your quest.
Yeah, you do have to rummage around for money at some point as well, and there's also a skateboarding segment where I think you get chased by bees. All throughout the stage are also these, red and blue, one-eyed aliens that you have to try and jump over. Oh, and the jumping and running physics are disparate from each other and nonsensical and crappy. The game controls kind of like ass. There is only 2 music themes in the game, one of which is just the straight-up Simpsons theme, and the other one is some original track, which I'm not sure if it was composed for this game in the first place, but, there's not much to the music. Hilariously, there are, a few boss fights where the music is just like a small snippet, like a 3-second bit of the Simpsons theme song repeated over and over. And for one of them in the second stage, it's the part that goes, but like it just keeps looping that over and over. So you're fighting this boss going, and it is hell in audio form. And I don't know who thought that was a fucking
it's
good idea.
It's so bad Discord made you cut out each time you attempted to hum that.
That probably spikes the sound for, because it's not human that I am humming there.
Unhuman Simpsons noises.
Yeah. I think the game had some potential to it, and I do like the catch of the first stage's investigative sort of bent, but it's the fact that it's also merging with a somewhat unforgiving platformer at the same time with not great controls that I can see why people don't love this one. And after the first stage, the game gets less innovative for the most part and just settles into being a more standard platformer. Like, the second stage is at the Springfield Mall and you need to jump over concrete on like floating magic wands because like there's a magic shop nearby in the mall or something, and you have to collect hats. And I think the third stage you need to pop balloons and stuff like that. It's
very collectathon before that was really a thing in gaming.
Yeah.
Which I know, I knew you were going to shudder like Sideshow Bob in that one.
Yeah.
Sideshow Bob's actually one of the bosses, coincidentally. And yeah, at the end of most stages, you also have a boss fight. The first one is Nelson. The third one is Sideshow Bob. Those are both reasonable. At the end, the second one is against Mrs. Botts, a one-time character in the first season who...
The babysitter bandit?
Yeah, that one. Yep. That one, yes. And the fourth boss, for some reason, is Dr. Marvin Monroe, of all characters. I don't know who thought that made any lick of sense. It's the weirdest type of
these popular Simpsons characters died during the past year.
You said Bleeding Gums Murphy and Dr. Marvin Monroe? You're wrong. These characters were never popular.
Excellent.
Yeah, exactly. I think you get some like bonus lives in the third stage, though, like using some items that you got in the first. So there's that. The fourth stage is at the Springfield Museum, and it is incredibly bullshit. There's like some janky there's one segment with tar pits that has some rather janky platform physics that's not excellent, and I don't know how I beat this. I don't know what motivated me to beat it, and I don't know why I still kind of have an odd soft spot for this piece of shit. But Simpsons has had a lot of really shitty games based on it. For what it's worth, for at least the potential that this one has, I think it's kind of one of the less shitty ones.
Well, here's the question.
What's up?
What's worse, this or Bart versus the World?
Bart versus the World is much worse.
How about Bartman meets Radioactive Man?
Ooh, I actually don't know that one as well. I know it exists. I don't know how similar it is to the first two of the, I guess, Imagineering Simpsons trilogy. So I don't really have much to comment on for it, but at least compared to the first game, Bart vs. the World, I think, is worse. It is much more a straight-up platformer without any of the innovation that the first game had, and like the levels are bigger, but that just means they're more confusing to navigate. I can never really get into it. Apparently, one section is kind of like the skateboarding segment in the first stage from the prior game, but even worse. It's like you're skating downhill in the Great Wall of China or something like that. I saw one of my favorite YouTubers, You Can Beat Video Games, actually. He mostly covers very quality games, but for some reason he actually covered Space Mutants and the World at some point. Maybe those were ones that he grew up on too. And there's this one part in Bart vs. the World that's just like this giant crypt where you just have to monotonously keep jumping out on coffins jutting out of a wall, and if you fuck up at any point, you have to jump on like 30 of these bastards up and over, and you fuck up at any point, you got to start from the beginning, and it just seems like there's nothing that shitty in Space Mutants. So I assure you, it could be worse. Even though I know Space Mutants ain't any great shakes, but I think it tried, and I think it was relatively one of the less bad games that Imagineering made. I know that's hardly a feather in their cap, but I don't know. It's stupid nostalgia. I wouldn't put it on like a top 200 name. Oh, Sharon, that's you can beat video games. Only the U is just the letter U and not YOU. He actually just released a video on River City Ransom today.
Nice.
Very nice, yes. But, so yeah, I want to say this is the least offensible game of the ones that we intend to cover tonight, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what everyone else thinks as we go on.
I want to make a quick aside here.
Please do.
They really had a blown opportunity because they blew it. They could have brought out games based on the ones on the show. Think about it.
Oh,
we could have got Larry the
Storm.
Looter. We could have got Escape from Grandma's House, Robert Goulet Destroyer, My Dinner with Andre.
yes. And like Kate said, yes, Bone Storm.
Oh, Bone Storm, definitely. We also could have got
Carvalho's Pudding Challenge.
Oh, we would have to get Lee Carvalho.
Yes.
But for that first couple of years, I think the best one they could have brought out was that boxing game that Bart was trying to get. Homer was trying to beat Bart at.
The kind of punch-out-ish one. I'm not sure if it got, like, Super Knockout Champ or something like... Hang on. Simpsons boxing video game.
It's funny, though, while Mike is looking that up, most of those fake games actually have, like, fan games now. Like, the Waterworld game has one that's pretty good.
Yeah.
There was one based on Larry the Looter, but it was kind of a short joke sort of game. There's My Dinner with Andre. I think Lee Carvalho...
The funny thing about the My Dinner with Andre game is that it feels like it kind of predicted like Telltale games, like 15 years earlier. So
yes, that's basically what it is, And
the boxing game was called Super Slugfest, apparently.
Now, also Larry the Looter, was that the same one that he was playing with?
Laura Powers, yes.
Yes, okay.
Plead insanity! Plead insanity!
Hit the change of venue button. Oh no, I'm in Texas.
So yeah, at least I also wanted to talk about this one so we can cram in some left field Simpsons references because I'm one of those insufferable nerds that'll never get tired of that. But
Mike, I'm glad that you found a Simpsons game that you don't despise.
Well, that, and of course the Konami arcade game is quite good as well.
Yes.
And Simpsons Hit and Run isn't bad. I don't think it's as great as some of its champions claim it as, but I think it's good enough for what I played. So there have been a few legit good Simpsons games, but most of them are definitely on the bottom of the overall pile of video games ever released. I just think that Space Mutants, it has a combination of nostalgia, like possible potential, and maybe just enough so bad it's good to it that I just wanted to bring it up. But there have been far worse Simpsons games released around its time and since then. I hear that Simpsons Wrestling on the PS1 is especially odious.
Hey, Mike.
What's up?
Make way for Willie.
The only thing I remember about that game is that Flanders is fucking OP. Like, there is no reason.
From Street Fighter 3, he has the resurrection and everything.
He has Gil's powers and...
Gil, sorry. Seth is from 4.
Yes, exactly.
Wait, so we're not talking about Gil from The Simpsons here.
No. Not old Gil.
Now let's talk rust proofing. These babies will rust right up. Don't close the sale. Close the sale.
I mean, we're talking less about Jack Lemmon and more about like a 7-foot Greek god who wears a thong and has golden hair and half his body is red and half his body is blue. If you can imagine that.
He's a JoJo character.
Okay, you know Gil, right? Yeah. He is Oh, who's the one he's based on? Actually, I thought he was more based on a Fist of the North Star character, but I'm
that
probably
too.
wrong.
He's a pastiche of a lot of different kinds of like figures and different sort of things.
Yeah. But Street Fighter 3 is a legitimately good game. So we should probably move on before we get too far into that territory.
I do want to say one thing
true.
here.
Yes.
In the chat, it's been brought up a couple of times that these these games can be like a mini game collection. You know,
I think so. Yeah.
Aiden Prime pointed out they could still do this and it would be a hit. But it would be
absolutely.
it would be a nice bonus game to put on there.
What's up?
Monkey Fracas Jr.
Huh?
Space. It goes on forever until you reach the end of it. Giant monkeys are throwing barrels at you.
Oh yeah, that was the very, very first note that Futurama started out on.
That would be a great bonus.
That would be a nice call forward. Yeah.
You stink, loser.
I need to do that Rush bit from Futurama too, where he's fighting the space invaders. That'd be a good one too.
I got no date, a 2-liter bottle of Shasta, and my All Rush mixtape. Let's
rock. Yeah, they could absolutely do a whole game based on Raiders of the Lost Arcade.
That would be pretty great. Yeah.
It's okay. I had another guy. Hooray! Oh, and the whole bit where General Cole and Pac-Man gets hit. Amy, tend to the widow, Pac-Man.
Well, what? Mamma Mia, the spicy meatball of justice. I forget the rest of that line.
The meatball of peace is rolled on into our white pants or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, before we get too reference heavy, we should probably move on, but...
Sorry, Donkey Kong, you're just not a draw anymore. Yeah, you still got it. All right, so who's going next? Snarb, Kate, which one? Come on, don't make it 41.
Snarb.
Snarb, you're up.
Okay, so I have two games here, or I should say I have two games that are mysteriously linked, which I'll bring up for the second one. But both of them begin with C, and the first one is Chacon the Forevermon, as they say.
Not this game.
I should note, I have a qualifier here that my hot take is that it is the best comic book-based 16-bit game of the era, or probably of all time. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, wait a minute. What about the TMNT game? What about the good X-Men games? Well, those don't count because via technicality, they are actually based off of adaptations of the comic book rather than being based directly off of the comic book like Chacon. So...
Okay, Snarb, I'm currently dialing into your local insane asylum. The men in the little white jackets will be there to collect you shortly.
I mean, to credit, all the TMNT games based at the time were based on the 80s show, so you're right about that, but X-Men? Were the Clone Wars ever covered outside of the comics at that point?
I think they did cover a little bit on the show, actually.
Shit, really?
Yeah,
kind of. That was kind of weird because that was like, it was kind of a pastiche of the comics, but it also had a lot of elements from the show. I mean, but they were made by the same company for starters. You can see the same DNA there. Like Chacon was kind of their, I guess their, what do you call it, prototype for their later games. Like Clone Wars. But where was that going with this? Anyway, I consider it one of the best comic book games of the era because it actually really does kind of dial down into sort of the character of Chacon, this sort of tortured soul who thought it was a good idea to challenge death to a duel, which he won, but effectively lost because now he's cursed with immortal life, and it kind of just sucks. He kind of looks like now like that guy from all those. Is it Judas Priest that has that one character?
Are you talking about Iron Maiden?
You probably mean Eddie the Head, yeah.
Yes, he looks a lot like
Maiden's
that, but in like a weird cowboy outfit, which is also kind of like a weird... He's a pastiche of a lot of different things, but I really enjoyed the game, and it's it really kind of sells up the sort of mood that the character goes for. Like, it opens with this long intro describing how tortured he is, his whole existence, and then you get into the game, and it's just, it actually does feel kind of like a torturous journey trying to kill all of these horrible cosmic evils that you're cursed to have to destroy. And it does this really interesting thing I have never seen another game do, and that's notably that it has like almost a twin stick or 8-directional melee system, at least for your swords and the grappling hook. Your other weapons are more traditional, an axe, a sickle, a hammer, all of which actually have unique functions later in the game in terms of traversing the environment. And the character actually moves pretty well, too. Like, he can roll, he can double jump, he can do a slashing double jump. He's a pretty nimble character, but unfortunately, his hitbox isn't the best, but that's really kind of the worst part of the game. Like, one of the worst stages in the game is, like, Air World, and that's pretty much it. And that one only sucks because you can die within the first 3 seconds, which, hey, to be fair, again, sells you on the atmosphere of being an immortal guy who, who apparently gets killed by everything, but keeps coming back.
Yeah, Air World was actually the first one I picked when I first played this game, so maybe that's a good chunk of why my opinion on it is kind of marred. My bad, I guess, although it's one of those things where, like, someone could have really fucking told me before I kicked myself in the dick, and like that the game will let you kick yourself in the dick like that just feels very user-unfriendly. But I gather the user-unfriendliness is, in your opinion, part of the game's charm.
I meant Rob. To be fair, Rob is probably right to dial the local insane asylum, because I feel like one of the reasons I really like this game is, okay, you're told from the outset that this guy's existence is kind of cruel and mean, and then you play the game and it's cruel and mean, and there's just sort of a narrative tie in there. I can't explain it, that so few games don't really do. Like, I hate to say it, but sometimes I kind of wish games were less fun and actually kind of mean to the player. I actually miss that, because some of it was on purpose, some of it was just due to design issues. Like, I can't tell you how many games I have played recently that all kind of feel the same, because they all have the exact same quality of life, features.
You mean like FPS games having like parkour and double jumps and grappling hooks and all that bullshit? Kinda?
Yeah. Like, yeah, every FPS has a grappling hook or a kick slide, a mantle, a double jump. And it's, okay, to be fair, Chicana also has a double jump. Before that was cool. A lot of games at the time didn't have it, but this one did. But it ties in very well with the character. The character actually is like, I hate to say it, it's actually a little bit like Dark Souls before Dark Souls. That's actually a series, while I'm not a big fan of, I appreciate that it is actually mean to the player. And part of this game is figuring out the mechanics. Like, it's figuring out how the character works, how the world works, like how your potions work. And using those to your advantage. It has a kind of similar system to the later Witcher series, in that Chikan has potions, and he can use those to give himself various advantages. And you're actually supposed to use those as much as possible. And in some cases, in those early stages, some of which are easier, some of which are harder, you actually want to actually grind a little bit and then kind of, just kind of croak, because he dies. But he has infinite lives and infinite continues, essentially. It's very unusual for the time in that respect, too. So, yeah, it's very brutal and mean, but it also compensates for that by not game overing you. And there's actually only one instance that can happen. But at that point, you've already beaten the game and gotten gotten the true essence or ending of it. There's just a lot of unusual things about this game I really enjoy, like the atmosphere, the kind of meanness of it, the way the character controls, the unique melee combat, the potion system, which is almost like, being able to just make your own cheats. Like, half of them make you either invulnerable or make you jump really high or, give you really overpowered weapons. So the game goes out of its way, at first to sort of seem insurmountable, but then as you kind of clue into how it works, it actually becomes quite accessible, quite fun. And I feel like that's a quality sometimes modern games lack, sometimes games of the era kind of lack. And that didn't lack exactly, but they were a little bit meaner about how it works. With this game, as long as you persevere, you will beat it. It's got a very Soulsian element in that respect. As long as you're just willing to play the game on its terms and kind of just, deal with it, you can just beat it. You can do a really good job at it, too. You can actually get better at this. So, yeah, it's a bit of a jank fest. I will say Airworld 1 makes the worst impression I have ever seen out of any stage in a game for two reasons. One, if you hold left or right at the start, you instantly die. And secondly, for some reason, his hitbox is really weird when it comes to colliding with the platforms. Now, Scrollboss also points something out. Chicana's kind of like Spawn before Spawn. That's another character I like. Actually, wait, dang it. So Chicana has the second best comic book game, because I feel like the Spawn game is actually probably one of the best comic book games of that era. So I actually forgot about that one.
That one's probably more legitimate.
That one also has its issues too, but it's a very good game. So yeah, there's worse things to be than the second best comic book game of the 16-bit era.
I gotta call you on this one too. There's another one I think is better.
What's that?
The Amazing Spider-Man Lethal Foes for the Super Famicom. It's not based on any of the
But hey, wait a minute. We didn't get that one. That doesn't count.
Don't care. Still 16-bit.
It is actually a pretty solid game. It actually does feel like the comics, too, with the way they handle the text and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had played that one more, but I've only played bits of it. Yeah, that's fair. I could say that's the best Japanese one. I'll give you that. But in terms of American comic book based games, Con is definitely at least second best, if not best. I don't know how else to really sell anybody on this game. Like, both of my games are kind of like that. It's like, give or take, either you like it and get it or you don't, and that's fair. But I feel like this is a game that, again, that if you just play it on its own terms, you kind of like get into sort of the narrative, the atmosphere. Like, even the harsh music kind of ties into it, because I remember the first stage I ever played when I rented it was the one in the spider den. And that really freaked me out because it's got these horrible creatures that make awful sounds. It's got this kind of grotesque-looking background. The music's really oppressive, like out of a horror movie. It really does sell itself.
Sorry if I may aside. Zaf, I think everyone but me hates Maximum Carnage. Shit, maybe that's one I should have talked about.
Actually, I do like it. It's just way too hard. I actually like Separation Anxiety a little bit better because that one's
a hot take.
Nicer.
That's a hot take. And as far as I'm concerned, any game where both Spider-Man and Venom are getting beaten up by Girl Scouts is not for me.
Later, you get beat up by bald umbrella men in glasses.
Yeah.
Yes, then there's that fight where you actually have to lose against like an endless army of fat men. That was really weird. Or those weird guys with the clubs.
Yeah. What the heck was that?
I think you can win, but it's very, very difficult to do so.
Yeah. What a game. Anyway, we digress. Sorry. You have anything else to say about Chican, sir?
I actually have an aside. Scrollboss also mentions there were a number of other independent comic books that got big video games. One that immediately comes to mind is
Dinosaurs for Hire.
That's also a pretty good game. I don't like it as much as Chican, but it's actually pretty solid as well. I believe Wildcats had a game, although I can't remember if that one ever got released. Prime did, or Ultraverse Prime did, which wasn't great. It does have a kind of a funny rap in it, if I recall, or some kind of theme.
There was also X-Mutants.
Yes, that one's actually playable, but I'm not a big fan of it. It's just kind of meh. Brandon brings up The Tick. That game's... Yes, that is way too long. That like the first stage, 9 of a Million Billion Ninjas. Yeah, absolutely appropriate title for a stage if I've ever seen one.
Spoon!
There should just be like a Tick game based on like just snatching up quickly everything planted by the Midnight Bomber, which what bombs at midnight or whatever his name was. Anyone remember that? Because that was like one of the very few bits I remember from The Tick.
I have a vague memory of that.
Vaguely, yes. I mostly remember Dinosaur Neil, which I think was the very first episode, as well as... No, wait. It was the episode with Chippendale Chairface, where he puts Chaw on the moon.
I really haven't seen enough Tick. I gotta get on that someday.
It's a really great cartoon. It's aged pretty well.
Yes.
I used to watch it all the time, but I haven't seen it in years.
What else do I have to say about the game? Well, actually, I believe Rob actually has something. He may not be a fan of the Genesis version, but he is a fan of the Game Gear version, which I have not played.
This is true. This was one of the first games I ever bought for my Game Gear. It's still very hard, but I just enjoyed it more in the Genesis game. It seemed like the Master System style and control seemed to actually work more in its favor. It played like a much tighter version of the Genesis game. It was, I can't even really describe it. It just always struck me as being better.
I'll have to give that a spin.
Yep. Plus, it says his name at the title screen, so you actually know how to pronounce it.
Are you a Chican or a Chicant?
You're a Chacon, the Forever Man.
Oh wow, actually has speech. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I will say, probably in a boon in its favor, while I know that not everyone is enamored by the sound capabilities of the Game Gear, I guess you prefer how it sounds to the incredibly crunchy Gems driver on the Genesis version.
The buzzsaws.
Freaking gems. Ugh.
Yeah.
And-
Because, like I said, it was my mistake to pick the infamous Air World first, because what I mostly remember about the game is the first stage music, which sounds like... Da, 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 da.
Okay.
Like,
You
it's-
remind me of this. There's actually the music. I like the music a lot in Chican because, like, one of them, like the Waterworld theme, sounds like a Lost Tool song because it even has that slap bass going for it.
sounds cool. I will admit.
Air World 1 kind of sounds almost like the riff you'd hear in like a metal or even a grunge tune. Like, some of it's more horror movie-ish, which is, appropriate for the visuals. But man, if people think Air World 1 is the peak terribleness of that soundtrack, they need to get to Air World 2, which is actually a really great stage because you get to ride on like giant dragonflies and joust other dudes. It's really cool, actually. And there's no bottomless pits.
Well, damn.
Yeah.
Actually, the back half of the game is pretty good. There's actually not a cheat code, but a skip that you can do if you use a specific potion power. So if the first half you're not sold on that, just skip to the second half. And you can even do that on practice mode. So you can actually beat the game with infinite potions and other stuff if you need something that's a little bit more friendly.
Well, I gotta say, I definitely do love the concept of the game. And from what I've read of the comics, Prime is right. They're legit cool.
Yeah, the game definitely has, 10 out of 10 style going for it, if nothing else. It does very accurately capture that, and I want to like the game. I do think that it has a lot of potential in it, and I'm glad that Snarb can see through the flaws to extract the potential. I guess my bugbear is that I just wish Chicane moved a little bit faster, if nothing else. He does have quite a strut on his walking animation, though. It is rather impressive.
There's a couple of tricks with his movement. You either double jump or you do the spin slide, which you can then immediately attack out of. It's a pretty good move.
Snarb. Would you care to mention the ending, or do you want to save that for...
I wanted
Pride
to actually
anymore?
mention that.
The ending is actually the best part of that game. It is so good. It ties
Yes.
into absolutely everything related to the narrative. And I'll actually let Rob explain it, because he's actually told that story before about the ending.
I love that ending. It's just after you defeat what's supposed to be the final boss, it's like Chicane's like, finally I can rest or something like that. And he takes his sword, shoves it right through his chest. He doesn't die. And he's like, not all evil's been destroyed. Not all evil has been destroyed. And then he hears death above him. It's like, haha, Chicane. Take a look up in the sky. See all those lights? They're all stars. And around each one are other worlds. Worlds teeming with supernatural evil. And you'll never be able to reach them. You're stuck here forever. And it's like, oh, Death, he's a bastard in that. He's like, hey, you are gonna challenge me? Okay. If I lose, you're fucked.
If you win, you're fucked.
Yep. So it's just
That,
like,
yes.
that is just one of the best endings I've ever seen, though. I got to give Chicane that.
It's really good. And then he does his trademark howl, which is like, it's like a howler monkey they've like pitch modified, and it sounds so horrific. Like that's one of your first experiences with the game is falling into pit and you go, ah.
It sounds like an angry elephant to me.
Yeah, something like that. They did some sort of like effect over it to make it sound really good. And the ending was actually setting up a sequel, which we were supposed to get on the Dreamcast. And the scraps from that, I believe Brahm actually was doing artwork for that one. It looked really cool and very gothic. And then the scraps from that did eventually end up in, what was it, Blood Omen 2, which is another troubled game, I will say. I need to play it, but I've heard some stories about that one.
And you know, Prime just said that ending's even in the comics.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. And then I know there's some kind of an actual final boss after that, which is apparently near impossible to beat.
Yeah, it looks a lot like one of the bosses from Shadow of the Beast to me for some reason.
It's very Giger-esque, yes. And even if you beat it, you get an hourglass that sits on your screen for 60 minutes. And then it says very quickly, not the end. So this game trolls you in so many ways. It's really good in that respect. I love that. It's just a total troll on the player.
Yeah, that I won't argue with. Not in the slightest.
Yeah, I do have to admit, anyone who frets even back then looking for the perfect ending, the golden ending or whatever, which I admit I am sometimes guilty of, but like that just seems like a massive fuck you to anyone who wants to do that, and it's not the sort of thing you would very likely see in video games today. So I have to admit, I have to admire the cheek of it.
Yeah, it's up there with the whole fuck you thing. Like, congratulations, the end.
Yeah, Karnoff. I remember in Samurai Showdown 2, Wanfu's ending was just him looking at you saying, "What, are you expecting an ending?" And then he throws his giant stone pillar at you, and that's just it. Which is pretty fucking great, but...
Oh, boy. So, alright, Snarb, you've made your case for Shikan. There, I said it. You made your case for it.
Hooray!
I'm still not sold.
Of course not.
All right, Kate, you're up next.
All right. So I usually like to go into these roundtables with notes that I've prepared ahead of time, but I kind of saved over my notes, unfortunately. So I'm just gonna kind of wing it. Hopefully my participation will be satisfactory.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
for
we
it.
always wing it. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Alright. So the first game that I'm going to pick, since it's currently on my mind, is Ninja Gaiden 3, The Ancient Ship of Doom for the NES.
It's a good one.
And you've probably heard quite a bit about this third game in the series. Usually the thing that I tend to hear people say about Ninja Gaiden 3 in particular is how its difficulty was altered in the North American version, since the Japanese version, which was called Ninja Ryukenden 3, that game was significantly more forgiving in a number of ways. I haven't played it personally, but I hear it has stuff like it retains the unlimited continues from the previous games, and it also has a password system, which is interesting. And the North American version gets rid of the password system entirely. It adjusts damage values for certain enemy attacks and makes them hit harder so that you can't survive as many hits without dying. And most notoriously for a series which up to this point had unlimited continues, the North American version of Ninja Gaiden 3 has limited continues. You can only continue 5 times before you're forced to start over from the beginning. And honestly, like, even taking that into account, I think it's fine. Like, taking into context how most games were designed back then, I think it makes sense for Ninja Gaiden 3 to have limited continues. the idea with the game having limited continues is that it encourages you to keep playing and replaying the game, including the earlier levels. Each time you replay the earlier levels, you're practicing them and gradually learning how your attacks work, how the platforming functions, how the enemy's movement patterns behave, etc. And as you replay the earlier stages, you can transfer your skills developed from those earlier stages into the later stages, both in terms of raw experience, as well as being able to preserve your extra lives or whatnot. So I think Ninja Gaiden 3 works just fine. I actually think it's maybe the easiest game in the trilogy, even taking into account limited continues. And there's a few reasons why that is. I still think it can be a challenge, but one significant thing about Ninja Gaiden 3 that the previous games did not have is in Ninja Gaiden, like most notoriously the first game and also in the second game, enemies would infinitely respawn. Like whenever you scrolled to the screen to the right or to the left, and then you scrolled backward, an enemy would respawn. The respawn rates were frequent enough that sometimes if you were positioned just right or just wrong, depending on your perspective, you could have an enemy respawn even though you haven't even left the screen yet. That's how frequent the enemy respawns were.
Yeah, and that's why the bullshit Eagle Chamber, whatever you want to call it, in the first Ninja Gaiden, Stage 6-2 is as infamous as it is.
It can be pretty brutal, but honestly, I think it works. I think Ninja Gaiden is a great game, and I love it. It's probably my favorite in the series, but Ninja Gaiden 3 would be my second favorite after that. I think Ninja Gaiden 3 is really solid, and I think the fact that Ninja Gaiden 3, it does get rid of the infinite respawning, and I feel like the level design works well with that, to where I don't find myself having an issue with that change in the design. All in all, it just feels like a very fairly designed game, even taking into account that it's harder than the Japanese version. And I also personally dig stuff like the way that Ninja Gaiden 3 adds stuff like being able to grab onto pipes or platforms from underneath and being able to jump up onto them. I feel like that's a cool new mechanic. And I like that you can get a power up to increase the length of your sword slash, so that can be really handy. And I also like the game's more sci-fi focused tone in comparison to how the first two games were more like pure dark fantasy type stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I think Ninja Gaiden 3 rules. I think like it generally gets kind of a bad reputation, but I think it's an awesome game and totally fair and worth checking out. And I definitely recommend people play it. You can use a ROM hack to restore the difficulty to how it was in the Japanese version, but I don't personally think that's necessary. I think the North American version is really fun. I love it.
It's definitely a fun game.
Yeah, in the North American version, I don't mind the limited continues or lack of passwords. It is the artificial doubling of damage that you take from enemies that hawks me off personally, because
I see.
Taking 6 points of damage from one fucking eagle or whatever, that's a paddling. I don't like that very much. If it wasn't for that, then I think I might agree with you that well, hard to say if I like it more than 1 or 2. I recognize you're not the hugest fan of 2 for whatever reason. And I will say at least that replaying like the whole trilogy next to each other, I still do like 2, but I don't think I like it more than the first, and I can't in good conscience say that 3 is much worse than the other 2 games. I do think that, yes, the things that it does offer are really damn good. Yeah, the climbing, as he mentioned, adds some more dimension to it. The fact that enemies don't respawn, I am thankful for. In places that have actually bonus lives that you can get from orbs or whatever, if you die in those stages, you can get the lives again. So there's like some leeway in some of
I
these
do appreciate
segments.
that.
Yeah, and
And if I
another
recall
thing.
correctly, there's a game or a stage later in the game that actually has 2 extra lives you can get, so you can farm lives
Yeah,
there.
you can grind them up. Yeah, exactly. I believe you're correct. And also, on top of that, you can. I really appreciate that in the containers, you can actually see what the items are, thus avoiding what I call the dreaded Castlevania accidental dagger pickup syndrome.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's nice.
There's a less clunky name for that, I'm sure, but you guys all know what I mean. I do think that 3 has a lot of great stuff going for it. I think it is just as creepy as the first 2 due to its sci-fi-ness, if maybe, well, hard to say if more so in some ways, but it's interesting the turns the plot takes. It is certainly weirder than the first 2 games. I mean, it starts with Irene's ostensible death, which is pretty kooky, as it were, and like the first stage has these weird sort of things in tubes with like these bulgy eyes. I don't even know what the hell they are, but it's pretty neat. Yeah, I think 3 is on par with the first 2, and I do agree with you. It's very much worth checking out. There was a time when I thought that I liked the Sega Master System Ninja Gaiden more than it, but at this point in good conscience, I don't think I could say that. 3 is on its own a heck of a game, but admittedly, the quote-unquote rebalancing that the Western version takes maybe does make it a bit insurmountable for some people. On the flip side of that, I did play through the Japanese version in full once, and funny enough, I thought it was too easy. So I kind of wish there was a hack that provided a happy medium between the 2 versions that felt like the most balanced take on it that can possibly be made.
So do you think something like the damage values of the Japanese version, but without the password system would work?
Yeah, something like that, possibly. Okay. Maybe like give you 10 continues. It does feel like NG3 is beatable, even with limited continues, which is something I'm not sure I can so reliably say for the first game, and its infamous expel you to the beginning of the entire act if you blow it on the final boss bullshit. As much as I love Ninja Gaiden, I was never cool with that ever, so...
So, Zafiro posted a comment saying, it is worth noting that without the addendum hack, the Ninja Gaiden Restored hack just changes the damage back, restores the damage back, and restores the password system.
Cool.
Is that the same thing, or are you talking about a different hack?
I'm not sure I knew that hack existed. I should look into it at some point, but yeah. That would be nice, yeah, to play it with
personal rules, I see.
Cool. Okay.
Good to know.
I wanted to say something different about the game, actually.
Go ahead.
All right. You know, if you follow the storylines, how it is in English, nothing is ever explained as to how, at the end of the second game, Ryu lost the dragon sword.
It's an interquel.
Yeah. And it's like, it takes place between the first and second games.
Right.
And they never make that clear. Even in the manual, they're like, after Ninja Gaiden 2, Ashtar returned to the bowels of whatever and bided his time. But now Ryu is back, and it's like the final chapter of Ninja Gaiden. It's like, actually, no, it's more like the second chapter.
They could have made that clearer, but yeah, I remember reading an interview with someone who worked on the trilogy, and yeah, the third game is intended to take place between 1 and 2.
So, well, that explains why he still has the dragon sword. Although
Indeed.
It doesn't explain what happened to his additional climbing abilities and that neat sword extension when going to 2. It's like, did that get transmuted into making the doubles?
Phantom doubles, yeah.
Probably.
Something like that.
And I will say,
sort of redistribution of ninjutsu, I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
one other thing I wanted to say, and it's the littlest thing, but I admired that they finally did it in that game. And you actually get to see his scarf fluttering in the wind.
That is cool. Yes.
And it's like after, third game, they finally actually animated that little thing. It's just a tiny little thing, but I appreciated it.
Pretty cool.
So, but that's
Yeah,
pretty much all I have to say about it.
When I was replaying part of Ninja Gaiden 3 earlier today, I was really impressed by some of the graphical effects. There's some really nice parallax scrolling in the backgrounds. Really quite a sight to see.
Oh, yeah. And here's something else that gets me, too, on another aside. Ninja Gaiden Trilogy for the Super NES. A console that should be powerful enough to do all that stuff, and all that was taken away. There's no parallax scrolling. It's like they really screwed that up. I don't know how
the music is shittier somehow.
In most cases, but there's a couple tracks that are actually pretty good.
Okay,
but it's like, how did they mess that up so badly?
I have not played Ninja Gaiden Trilogy, but from what I hear, it is a bummer that it turned out to be worse than the individual NES entries.
Yeah,
I think they probably just didn't have the budget or weren't used to the hardware or something.
And if it tells you anything, they mapped the attack and jump buttons to A and B instead of B and Y on the Super NES controller.
It does kind of feel like Tecmo struggled a bit during the 16-bit era. I don't know if that's just me who feels that. But,
I really wish that we could have gotten a cool, awesome 16-bit Ninja Gaiden game. That would have been like my dream.
That would have been cool.
That would have been, yeah.
Closest we got was that Genesis prototype that never came out for plays like the arcade game.
I've tried that prototype. It's interesting, but definitely a different experience.
Yeah. There's a fixed version that actually fixes the control issues it has.
That's cool.
I know someone was working on a fan game for a Ninja Gaiden 4 at one point.
Oh, really? I didn't hear about this.
This is a while ago.
Okay.
Apparently, you were going to have the ability to switch between Ryu and Robert T.S.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading
that guy
about
from the
this.
second game?
Yep.
Yeah. And I remember I remember that Ryu would also be able to transform into a dragon and Robert into a tiger, giving it some sort of like altered beast-esque quality to it.
That was weird.
I don't know what to make of that, but
yeah.
I guess maybe it could be okay.
On a whole, we'll probably never find out.
Oof.
Snarb, do you have anything to opine this? You've been rather quiet throughout all this.
I haven't played very much of any of the Ninja Gaiden trilogy, such as it is. I think I played the most of the first one, but I've never actually beaten any of them. For whatever reason, I didn't grow up with them, and by the time I was able to access them via emulation, it just wasn't as interested in them for whatever reason. I've heard lots of stories about them, and I have heard that 3 was poorly received, but from the sounds of it, it sounds like just a pretty solid entry in a pretty solid franchise.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about how I feel.
Yeah.
This Ninja Gaiden 3 is certainly not as off the plot as the modern Ninja Gaiden 3 was compared to its first 2 entries. From what I understand, that game legitimately did suck.
Well, I thought you were going to say for a second that, I thought you were going to bring up the North American version of Castlevania 3, which I do think that's an example of a game that was made way too bullshit fucking hard in the North American version compared to the Japanese version.
You're not wrong. I do think the changes are slightly less drastic than they are for NG3, but at the same time, the innate game itself is also harder, so any disadvantage on it feels like a kick in the nuts. So
Now wait just 1 minute. Mike?
What's up?
There are new Ninja Gaiden games?
Well, yeah, you see, for the fighting game Dead or Alive, Ryu Hayabusa was actually sort of redesigned and made one of its combatants, and from there,
Same
they
spot still.
figured that, now that it has this badass new redesign, we should make a sort of action game based on it. I imagine you're not the hugest fan of Devil May Cry, if I had to guess.
What I played of the first game is not bad.
Oh yeah, no, the first game's really damn good still. Maybe a little outdated compared to the latter ones, but I still really like it. So yeah, they basically made a new Ninja Gaiden game that had sort of a DMC approach to its action. Build appropriately as being quite hard, but also very badass game. Besides his trademark dragon sword, he gets other weapons like this nunchaku-esque flail, like a big ass hammer, and some sort of like staff, if I'm not mistaken, and other stuff. And yeah, it is a damn good game, and it got an even better re-release on the Xbox called Ninja Gaiden Black that added in a lot of stuff in the game and with extras alongside it. And sadly, that never left the original Xbox. One of its few remaining exclusives, which many lament hasn't quite come back. Like, there was another remake made of it called Ninja Gaiden Sigma that unfortunately is not as feature-rich as Black, and many people consider it inferior, but for whatever reason, they decide that this is the reason to bring back to modern generations, which
I don't think
get.
they have the source code for Ninja Gaiden Black. I think
Oh, it's
that
so
might be
fucking
it.
stupid. That is so fucking stupid when game companies just get really neglectful of good games like that. It's very frustrating for someone like me who's really big on game preservation.
I do have one more thing to add.
But I digress, yeah.
Zafiro added, I do agree with Zafiro's comment that it would be cool to be able to play as Irene Liu at some point in the Ninja Gaiden game, since she does spend a significant chunk of the series just being a damsel in distress.
Sadly, yeah, that is mostly her agency, and it is rather unfortunate. I
For
think
what
she
it's
gets...
worth, she does have more agency in Ninja Gaiden 3, so that's
She
another
does,
cool
yeah.
thing.
I was going to bring that up. Yes, definitely, and I do appreciate that. I mean, well, I'm not going to spoil it for whatever worth the plot is nowadays, but I do appreciate that she does feel more active. Makes up for how very painfully damsel-y she was in 2.
Oh gosh, yeah.
She even doesn't. She even looks more like a normal girlfriend than she does, than as badass as she looks in the first and the third. So
I just remember
I don't-
that one cutscene in particular, which I loved.
what was that?
Well, it involves Irene shooting things.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
I do like one thing. I can't believe I forgot about this. I like the fact that they actually brought back a dangling thread from the first game.
Yeah, Foster returns.
Foster.
That bastard.
That's the guy.
And not to say too much, but he gets rather appropriately dealt with, and I appreciate it.
Yes. Oh boy. So, any other thoughts on Gaiden 3?
I'm good.
All
It
right.
good.
Well, I guess we're down to me. So,
Bring it.
okay. Today I'm going to talk about a game made by Pack-In Video. Now, anyone out here who knows Pack-In Video's reputation should be going, uh-oh.
Uh-oh, indeed.
And this is also a game that's licensed. Double O.
Double indeed.
But it's a game I actually really enjoy, even now, without the whole nostalgia thing. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are just going to be like, what? Why? But, well, I'm not going to keep you in suspense longer. It's Predator for the NES.
Oh, really?
Yes. Now, I can understand why most people were disappointed in the game. They were probably expecting like a Contra clone, which makes sense given the movie. I'm sorry, that big mode doesn't cut it as a Contra clone.
Now, oddly, that big mode has more in common to do with Genpei Tomaden than anything.
Yeah. And admittedly, that's my least favorite thing about the game is the big mode.
Yeah.
But the main game itself, it definitely does not play like Contra. You do get weapons. You can get a grenade, you can get a machine gun, a laser gun, or you just have your fists, depending on what's going on. But it's kind of like an action platform action puzzle kind of game in a way. Because you have to figure out the best way to get through each stage without getting killed. And you really have to rely on your own reflexes and wits and everything to do this. Also, for some strange reason, Arnie is wearing pink pants and white go-go boots. But that's neither here nor there.
Gotta work with the color palette.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Which is funny because you got all sorts of dudes running around wearing camo.
Womp womp.
And there's far too many predators in this game.
Yeah, considering that the original movie was about just one very implacable intergalactic hunter, it's kind of baffling that there is more than one in this game, especially when Arnold had enough trouble just dealing with the one in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
So you think they should have called it Predators?
There's no Adrian. Is anyone going to hack Adrian Brody into this game? That's what I want to know.
They should.
I haven't actually seen the movie Predators yet.
It's not as great as the first two, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I kind of checked out after that one.
It very much is an action sci-fi movie of the early 20th century and all that entails.
And, actually...
Early 20th century?
Early.
It was in the 2010s, I thought, actually.
I forget if it was in the 2000s or the 2010s. I guess it's right on the cusp, but yeah.
That would be 21st century.
Now I'm picturing...
I said 20th? God damn it. I'm stupid.
See, now
I didn't know they had a Predator movie in the 1910s or whatever.
Yeah, now I'm picturing a silent Predator movie starring Charlie Chaplin and directed by Georges Méliès.
Gadzooks, an invisible hunter from the stars yonder, or something like that.
Exactly.
I mean, thematically speaking, since the Predators came to Earth at different points in time, that could have happened.
Yeah, someone, maybe done like one of those, stupid mashups that were all over, like Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter. They could just do Pride and Predators,
Sure.
I would pay good money to see Pride and Predators.
I actually would too, yes.
But
I mean, that was kind of the premise for Prey, wasn't it? They set it back in time.
Yeah, it takes place, I think... I haven't seen it
Oh,
yet,
yeah.
but
I heard that was actually surprisingly good.
Yeah, I need to check that out. I haven't
Same.
had the chance yet.
Yeah, big same.
The last one I saw was Predator 2.
Predator 2 is under-ass rated.
That gets
Honestly,
a bad rap for some stupid reason, but it's a good movie.
In some ways, I like it more than the first film. I don't know if I can say that I universally like it more than the first, but maybe I want to say that. It's the hot take stream, so that would go... It's not movie hot takes, but still.
Well,
I think Predator 2 is fine, but I do prefer the first movie.
I mean, yeah, fair. The first one was just lightning in a bottle. It just does everything about what it does just note perfect. I mean, I personally nowadays see it as a takedown of toxic machismo, which, was unthinkable in the 80s for a movie to be subversive in that way. Most of them were just kind of unironic might makes right Reagan-esque
like
shooters. Aliens also went with the same premise. Like, it defined the Space Marine, except for the fact that they all get fucking wiped in the first act, and only a few characters are left after. I love the first two Aliens and the first two Predators very, very much, as it were.
So, Rob, do you have anything else to say about the game?
Oh, yes. But I do want to state for the record that I remember reading contemporary accounts of why people didn't like Predator 2. And the main reason that seemed to be cited was the fact that Arnold wasn't in it.
Danny Glover's a better actor than Arnold. I'm sorry.
Well, I remember hearing that the plan was to have Arnold as a supporting role, like that person at the end who's been tracking the Predator was supposed to be Arnold, but Arnold apparently didn't like the script.
Yeah.
I thought Arnold was supposed to be Gary Busey's character.
Oh, then he would have got killed.
Well, they could have written different around it, but
Pharaoh, I believe this is Predator on the NES.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. My some days I want to talk movies and I do games more. I apologize. We should
Anyway,
probably
let me get back to the game then. So, one feature in a lot of puzzle games, like say Adventures of Lolo, is the fact that if you get yourself trapped and you literally have no way out, you can actually suicide yourself by pressing select. That's also something Predator has.
crazy.
Yep. So, in a way, it's like I said before, it's like a run and gun puzzle hybrid. And yeah, on the slightly negative side, the controls are a little slippery. I mean, this game requires precision jumping, and it is hard to pull that off at times. And for some reason, the final boss is a giant floating predator head.
Nice.
One thing, though, is that the soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal.
Surprisingly, yeah, that's the part I remember best. One track in particular is honestly one of the best things I've heard in the end. It's one that goes like da na 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 na. That one. It sounds like a fucking like military march.
Yeah, because you got the drums going. It's like doom, 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 doom.
Yeah, that one.
But and it requires patience to get through. And I know back in 1990, I had a lot of patience because I actually finished the game. I'm still the only person I know that ever actually finished it at the time. Don't ask me how I did it.
That's awesome.
How did you do it?
Well, I picked up the game, put it in the console, pressed power, sat down, picked up the controller, pressed start.
All right, wise ass, I get it.
And then I just played it until I was done.
Yeah, there are some games I look back on and I wonder how the unironic fuck did I do that, and it does feel like I have rusted a little in some games, but I guess part of that is also down to impatience and unwillingness to learn its ups and downs, which that is how I eventually beat Battletoads. I just fucking dead-ass study it for like 2 weeks straight, and I'm not sure it was worth it, but I sure did it.
I will also...
Go ahead.
As I say, the cutscenes, too, are actually pretty close to the movie.
Surprisingly, yeah.
What got me was that one in particular where they find the dead American soldiers who'd been skinned.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of amazing to have on the NES, of all things, back in Nintendo's, wuss-ass family-friendly era.
Mm-hmm. And that and Arnold's response, I will find whomever did this.
Because he sure said that in the movie.
Yeah. Oh, and the fact they call the Predator, you are one ugly beast.
Well, okay, that's fair battleization,
fair,
I guess.
Yeah, kind of hard to put the rest of it in there.
Womp.
Yeah, but I do kind of miss the ingenuity that Arnold showed in the movie as far as, setting the trap for the Predator and then the explosion that wiped everything out.
Yeah.
Instead, you fight a giant floating predator head. So,
yeah, I mean, certainly you do have to accept that it's almost nothing like the film where Dutch, Arnold's character, was actually quite outmatched, so he had to use his wits to at least wound the creature. But when it got down to finally fighting it hand to hand, he got pretty thoroughly whooped and only won due to that log trap he had set up for him.
Mm-hmm. But at the time, you just kind of came to accept that for licensed games.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, look at Star Wars for the Famicom.
Oh, yeah. Good old Scorpion Vader and whatnot.
Yep.
I believe there was a Shark Vader at some point,
there
too.
Was.
Excellent.
It's all the power of the Force.
And the Death Star trench is set up like a racetrack.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, but overall, I think if you're patient and you like, more like action-oriented puzzle stuff, you might get into Predator more. But if you're just expecting to play Contra Clone, number whatever, then you're going to be disappointed, which is what I'm pretty sure happened there, because most people were probably expecting, oh yeah, we're going to get into the Contra all action, like Arnold going kicking ass there. Yeah, what's Arnold doing? He's punching things, and like there's like weird stuff out of Metroid, and what's this thing called Pine?
I mean, certainly the irony being the likenesses for Bill and Lance on the NES cover of Contra being based on Rambo and Dutch from Predator, so it's a very weird offshoot, but I will say I appreciate they tried to do something different with it, because if they had tried to make a Contra clone, it would have ended up grossly inferior, I'm sure. So
either way, the game would have been cast aside.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, I still like it. I still play it from time to time. And yeah, that's where I stand. Anyone else have anything they want to say about it at all?
I have not played it myself, but I can see how one's expectations could actually have a significant impact on whether the game is more or less enjoyable. So I'm glad that you were able to find something to enjoy from it, even if it's not the same as what most people would expect the Predator game on the NES to be like.
Indeed. And also, Rex Warden in the chat has noted tolerance for BS in games degrades with age, so that probably explains my case for not wanting to go back to games like that.
I feel like I've gotten more tolerant of that as I get older.
Yeah, same, actually. I am actually more willing to just say, well, it's a game. It's got a weird set of rules. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Hell, how are you people are one-upping me. Bullshit.
Get on our level. Gosh.
Oh, you fail.
Whatever.
Well, to explain it to you, Mike, I had to kill my sense of honor and dignity, so that helped a lot with appreciating games more, especially as they crueler and crueler to me over time. But
bullshit, I have no dignity, man.
I have played the Predator game, but I forget how and I forget where, when, and why. So I don't remember having any expectations of it. I just thought, oh, this is kind of unusual. They kind of decided to go for more of the survival part of the movie versus, like the first, kind of almost action-y bits at the very start. And that actually kind of makes sense because a good chunk of it is, Arnold being chased by the Predator. And I kind of appreciated that it had light puzzle or survival elements to it, but I never made it very far. I don't even know if I beat the first stage. I think I got to a cave and I died.
That sounds about right.
I will still say, though, that the big mode is kind of crap.
I didn't even know there was a big mode.
Can you explain what that is?
Big mode basically is what happens, like every fourth stage or so, it'll say big mode instead of, stage whatever. And then you're faced with this, he's maybe about a quarter the size of the screen Arnold sprite. And he's on a featureless background. There's these bubbles flying everywhere. You shoot them and they give you power-ups. And then when you've blasted your way past enough of those, and there's little floating platforms made of rock that come by too, eventually a Predator shows up, about the same size as Arnold, starts throwing Predator hits at you. And he disappears and reappears, and he can kill you pretty quickly. You're not careful. You just basically have to jump and keep shooting. I recommend getting the power-up that says 3 on it, because that's like a rapid-fire machine gun. There's a couple others, like a boomerang bullet and one other one. I think it's like an exploding one. But they're both kind of crappy. So, but the bubbles do a lot of damage to you, too, if they hit you. And it just, your health will just drop if you're not good at this.
Yeah.
And the controls are kind of spotty in it. It just didn't work as well as the rest of the game did.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah. So that's...
Indeed.
That's the one problem that I have with that game in particular.
Also, something offhand that Rex also noted, the cover for Contra is actually 2 copied pictures of Arnold, not Stallone, even though it looks like it.
Yep.
That makes sense. I guess I haven't really looked the fine print for what is my favorite game of all time, so I feel like I should know this, but I appreciate it, Rex. Thank you.
Like, catch up with the rest of us, all right?
What, me? No.
Well, speaking of which, you're next.
Loops back around to me, huh?
Yep.
Well, oh boy.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yes.
More like a bridge too short.
Do they mean? Don't they mean fearless? Uh-oh.
I hope no one ordering cheese wheels of doom.
Jesus shit. Bubsy, Claw's Encounter of the Third Bird Kind, was a game, I believe, released in '93 that was maybe the peak, the apotheosis of the crappy Sonic-ass mascot attempt. Shit, what do we call it? Rob, did you have a name for that?
Extreme Critters.
Yes, the Extreme Critters craze that pockmarked the early to mid 90s, where Sonic the Hedgehog was a giant hit, and then every company just saw dollar signs and wanted to chase the hedgehog, so to speak, and just see if we could try and make something that's like Sonic, that is cool, edgy, extreme critter. So
yeah,
let's
real quick, could you tell us the full name of this game again?
That would be Bubsy, Claws Encountered of the Third Kind. I can never fucking pronounce it right. I think, yeah. The game is
an FURRED, not PHIRD.
Yeah, the game is full of terrible puns. In fact, I think every stage is a bad pun. I guess Cheese Wheels of Doom isn't the worst pun, but I wanted to go into it. Bubsy stage names, if the internet is so kind to tell me. Let's see. Forbidden Plummet instead of Planet. A Bridge to Fur. Let me see. Our Furless Leader. A Fistful of Yarn. Beavery Careful. Wow, that is fucking terrible. Jesus Christ. Anyway, let me see. Also, the bad guys are known as the Woolies, so there's a good...
Yeah, so they stole Bubsy's yarn. There's actually a comic book that comes with the game in the manual. It's really good, actually.
Surprisingly, what the fuck?
Hang on 1 second, guys.
What's up?
Just you keep talking. I gotta hang on 1 second.
Okay, so Mike, you are underselling this game tremendously. You forgot to mention the most important part of this. This is a Sonic clone with speech samples. That's actually not terrible, unlike our good pal and friend Awesome Possum, which also unfortunately had speech samples.
Let me get this out of the way. Bubsy is absolutely an better game than Awesome Possum kicked Dr. Makino's butt. Awesome Possum is the absolute drippiest, dogshit, assiest end of that whole Extreme Critters trend, and I will not hear otherwise. Awesome Possum is the absolute rock bottom. I do not think you can get worse than him, and if you can, then I don't want to fucking know about it.
Please tell us more, James Rolfe.
It fucking sucks, it fucking fucks, it fucking blows, it's a piece of shit, and I don't like it.
Oh, we're talking trash about Bubsy? What'd I miss?
I was just quoting the Angry Video Game Nerd in his Halcyon Days, one of my favorite quotes, but I digress. So, yeah, Bubsy is not as terrible as Awesome Possum. Let's at least agree on that baseline.
I can agree on that. Because
I agree.
If nothing else, that is the one morsel of unironic praise Bubsy will earn tonight, if nothing else.
So, Sharon, this is not all negative about Bubsy. Mike is actually defending the game.
Yeah, and there is actually a running theme if you all haven't picked up on it, but I'm not sure if I should point it out.
Oh, go ahead.
Point it out.
Well, tonight, if you all haven't figured it out, is a happy hot take stream. This was somewhat unintentional, but we eventually decided that we would all pick 2 games that we want to defend instead of any quantity of games that we want to shit on instead. I admit I was somewhat opposed to the idea at first because I'm a bitter crankshaft, but I realized then that we can talk about some really odious-ass games and talk them up, and I just kind of got into the idea. And I realized, hey, you know what? I wrote an entire short story about Bubsy. Why shouldn't I talk about him?
Totally.
In Rob's Memoirs of Virtual Caveman, I contributed several guest stories, and one of them was talking about how duped I felt getting suckered into the marketing for Bubsy back then. Which, in retrospect, even though I still do think to a degree that I was bamboozled and suckered in by the marketing hype, you know, at this point, I just kind of own it. It's a part of me. I played a lot of Bubsy, and I wanted to like it, if nothing else. And, you know, gosh darn it, eventually I think I actually did come around to unironically liking the game on at least a nominal level, which is fucking crazy to think about, but again, there were worse mascot games, if nothing else.
See, Sharon, if you still think we're cracking on Bubsy over here and talking about how bad it is, no, Mike is saying he actually doesn't mind the game.
No, yeah, I do actually unironically like Bubsy. What do I like about it? I do appreciate the massive verticality that is in most stages. Bubsy can jump really high, and he can actually progress at great speeds and literally glide through much of the stages, I should say. I guess the game's sort of really cheesy charm. It's very dorky music. Bubsy making all sorts of very lame puns. Brandon denotes that there are games based on Kool-Aid and Chester Cheetah and fucking the Fido Dido game of all things.
Don't forget Cool Spot.
Oh yeah, Cool Spot's actually kind of not bad, except at least one of the train stage in that one really fucking sucked. I actually streamed that live with my friend Andrews, and that stage was shit, but the rest of the game actually fairly cromulent, if nothing else.
I like Kool-Aid Man for the Atari 2600.
Oh, nice. Not sure I ever played that one, but I'll take your word for it. But Bubsy is relatively perfunctory, but does have an odd sort of style about it, and in a way, I do think that Bubsy, being as hilariously fragile as he is maybe part of that bad charm. Like, unlike Sonic, who can keep taking hits as long as he gathers at least one ring after getting hit, Bubsy's got nothing. One hit and he's fucked. And if you aren't always holding on to the glide button, he will very easily die from fall damage. But he can also die from like cars or trains running him over, or just running into a stationary Wooly who's just standing around, and they apparently have some sort of touch of death barrier, which I know a lot of games have something like this, but it almost feels kind of ridiculous here, more than usual.
Touch of death?
Yeah, exactly, Bart. And even just getting whomped by a fucking manhole cover is enough to kill him for some reason, which, well, I guess getting hit by one of those at warp speed would kind of be fatal, but, like, I don't know. Something about how hilariously easy it is for Bubsy to die kind of adds to the game's hilarity to me, but I do like the first 2 sets of levels. Like, most stages, except for the final one, have like 3 sets of levels in them, and the first 3 are like this sort of suburban plains with like just trees and houses everywhere, and the music is jaunty enough. I can't say if it's excellent, but it's stuck in my head. The first stage scene goes like da 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 da.
Yeah, that's burned into my brain because I also rented and played this game all the time.
Okay, that's enough.
Yeah, that's enough.
Thank you. Hang on. What else do I like about it?
The voice samples are surprisingly clear.
Yeah,
it actually has.
Okay, actually, yes.
It has very good voice samples for the era, and AI Mike on a lot of the things, like the animation, like they actually paid attention to sort of making it the sort of slapstick sort of character, and actually, making if you die, you kind of just laugh at it, like he gets hit by a manhole cover. Okay, he just kind of falls over with birds, flying over his head. If you walk over tacks, he deflates and then blows away like a balloon. There's just a lot of funny ways to die and just weird things to see in the game.
I forget what causes it, but I really like the death animation where he's just grinning at the camera and then he literally breaks into many pieces and falls apart.
Snarboo just made me think of something.
What?
The opening of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You could actually apply that to Bubsy here.
You could, yes.
I could see that, yes.
What is this? A tweeting bird? A tweeting bird. Read the script. What does it say? Bobcat gets logged. Bobcat sees stars.
Yeah, if nothing, I think that is what I like about Bubsy. I'm a huge fan of Looney Tunes and a lot of Western animation, and even more than Sonic, it really does have a kind of actual cartoon vibe. I think, like, Earthworm Jim also has that vibe, and certainly it arguably does that better, but, it's certainly not to discount Bubsy, which, in its sort of, dorky animation and whatnot, I just kind of came to unironically kind of liking it later in life. What's up?
Now that I think about it, this might actually be the first instance of a game really capturing the Saturday morning cartoon feel, because this predates Boogerman, Earthworm Jim, and a bunch of others that attempt to do that. Power Pigs of the Dark Age, which I was poking fun at Mike over earlier today.
You mentioned that to me earlier. Yes, you did.
Yes, I did.
Better Than Liquid Kids by Tiger, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I won't say anything I can't take back ever again on that count. But
womp womp.
Okay, so like this game did have a very good marketing campaign too. Like I remember it was advertised in game magazines. I can't remember if it's Game Pro or Game Fan, any of those. And
I remember
in all of them.
Yeah, it had a fully featured comic, and it had this gorgeous art, and it sort of summarized what the plot was. Our good pal and friend Bubsy's actually a Hollywood movie star. He has the big collection of yarn that's been stolen by aliens, and it does set the mood for the game really, really well. And it does capture that Saturday morning cartoon vibe. It's got the animation, it's got the look, it's got the voice samples, and as far as mascots go, Bubsy is probably actually one of the more likable, Sonic also rans.
He's got more he's got more personality than like fucking Oscar or whatever that asshole was.
You sure you don't mean personality?
You know what? I do. I do.
Yes, he has the sass, which is a very good thing for a cartoon character to have. It's almost Bugs Bunny-esque, but he's got a little bit more of a cattiness to him. It's very interesting.
I mean, catty, literally, yes, because he's a bobcat.
So many puns.
I tried out Bubsy for the first time just last night, and being my first time playing the game, I think it's kind of neat. It's not a game I played the first 3 stages. And from that, I wouldn't say it's a game that I was super into. I think one of the things that really stood out to me about Bubsy in terms of its design is the way that the platforming and the jump physics work, since they're very unusual. I wouldn't really say that Bubsy's jump physics are good or bad per se. They're just different from the norm. And the way that works is, in most platformers, you generally have some degree of momentum when you try to jump forward or like to the left or to the right in midair. And with Bubsy, generally if you make a jump from a standstill position, then it works the way it would in any other platformer. But if you jump while moving to the right, then you can control your movement trajectory, but Bubsy will default to continuing to move to the right, and vice versa with continuing to move to the left if he's running to the left as he jumps. And you can adjust that to an extent, but you can't control it. You can't fully reverse your trajectory in midair. And the fact that you default to moving, even if you're not touching the D-pad right then, can throw someone off. So I can see someone getting really frustrated with that if they don't know what they're getting into. But once you understand it, then I think it works okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Bubsy's physics are pretty wonky. They're of a style, but they're far from the worst physics I've ever played. They certainly do have a curve, but, I think if you're willing to work with the game long enough, then, you might sink into it. And at some point, I did actually figure that I've had this game for as long as I did. I might as well actually beat it. And every 3 stages, going on to basically the next collective of levels where the scenery totally changes, you do get passwords. So on that basis, you get Linden continues, but, you also get passwords every 3 stages to make it fair, as it were. So, the game does, I think, get less better, and, well, I'll say, besides the first set of levels, I also really like the next set of levels after that, which take place at a carnival, which had this,
the carnival's the highlight of the game.
Absolutely. You have these, strongmen contest bouncers that propel Bubsy ridiculously fucking high, up several screens and even off the screen. And, there are these roller coasters to walk around, these, funhouse doors that transport you to different areas. You get attacked by bouncing concession food, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the hot dog and the pizza and
the ice cream, yeah. The carnival is definitely the highlight, and the game sadly does get not only crappier, but harder after that, because the Western levels are kind of bullshit, and you have to, the Western levels are, twice as long. It's, you need to,
there are 2 sets of stages, yes.
Yeah, and after that, it's, a sort of, waterside, nature-y area, and then after that is another nature-y area, but, with more forest-like, more trees, but those 2 sets of levels kind of feel a little bit too similar to each other in some way. I think they could have been a little crazier with the settings, so that's a little disappointing. The final level is all sci-fi-y. It's the Woolly Mothership or something like that. It is actually pretty cool for what it is, but I do think that, the game peaks from in stages 4 through 6, but I don't know, there's just enough about the concept and its overall cartoonishness that just makes me does make me like the game unironically in the end. It's okay, maybe there's a little bit of irony in there still, but it's a loving irony, I guess. Fuzzy is far from the worst of its type that I've played, and also the best game of its series released, because unfortunately there have been several more Bubsy games afterward, and they are all much shittier than the original. So
I do want to play
Bubsy note that I was
sometime.
I was just about to say, I was actually in negotiations with Mike over this. I was considering making my second game Bubsy 3D, but I'd only gotten maybe a third of the way through it. But I'll just say that game's maybe underrated, but that's another story for another time.
It is.
Yeah, let's try and limit it to 1 Bubsy game per stream.
That's why I thought, that's why I kind of argued with Snark. Do we really want 2 Bubsies? Rob's gonna, haul us out like drunken barflies if we do that.
Yes, and to be fair, you've actually, you've beaten Bubsy. I haven't fully beaten Bubsy 3D, and also, I'm sure Rob wants to save it for the Bubsy roundtable that he's been cooking up for years now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had that in the works.
Yeah. As an aside, on the Hardcore Gaming 101 Discord that I'm a part of, Bubsy's kind of become our sort of mascot, and we have lots of icons of him, all sorts of various trolling grins, pointing upward to agree with the prior post. My favorite one is that one sort of odd-looking smile that he has from Fractured Furry Tales, except we have him vibrating, so it's kind of like a very nervous sort of...
Or very excited, depending on how you read it.
Yeah, and we pronounce it Bubsy. Like that. I love it, frankly, so...
See, I mean, we've already had 2 Bubsy games in a row, because we talked about the one on the Jaguar in the last stream. And now we got this one.
Yeah, so Bubsy 3D would probably like cause Rob to completely break like example.
I have one, Mike. He would basically punch reality like Superboy Prime.
Oh dear God.
Our comics friend Sam would probably throw you out of the bar for that one, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, is there anything else I could say? Oh yeah, Bubsy did get a... It is kind of recursive because spawning from the game, we're talking about how cartoonish Bubsy feels. It did get an animated cartoon pilot that I'm not sure I've ever seen, but by all accounts, I hear it's terrible.
Yeah, it kind of misses the point. It also has a lot of archival, like, public domain footage in it for some reason. Like, he'll say some wacky catchphrase, and then it'll show, like, the guy getting hit in the stomach by the cannonball, and I'm like...
That sounds like some real budget-ass problems there.
Yeah,
it's very budget. It barely had a story. They were introduced a bunch of annoying characters, which actually do appear in Bubsy 2. The armadillo is actually from the pilot.
Yeah.
He has two annoying nephews, or he has two annoying... he has an annoying nephew and niece, I believe.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I think, like, a fair like, a large chunk of the pilot, if I'm not mistaken, was Bubsy just being unnecessarily mean to his timid armadillo friend, and it got into, like, sort of borderline Carl Pilkington like levels of cringe, the universe shits on this person sort of levels of comedy that can be pretty hard to watch, so...
there's a reason it was never picked up.
Yeah, and that's probably, I think, for the best in this case. Frankly... Oh god, am I about to say this?
Let's find out.
Say it.
Bubsy should have been one and done like RoboCop.
Okay.
I just fucking compared Bubsy to my favorite fucking movie forever. I better stop talking. Snarboo.
I mean, you're not necessarily wrong in that respect.
I'm not, I feel terrible.
You know, I may have to override Directive 4 on this one.
Yeah, please do. Just shut me down for whatever reason. I deserve it.
Play him
Mike?
off, Snarb.
Mike, you're fired!
And then Mike falls out of a window.
Yep.
And then I sound like this when I hit the ground.
And then you get hit by a stock footage cannonball.
And then Toons the driving cat crashes his car on you. Because that piece of stock footage never gets old.
No,
Zafiro
Toons is one of my favorite fucking SNL things ever.
Zafiro just wrote a comment saying, no joke, the what could possibly go wrong catchphrase came from the developers saying it a lot in the game's development.
I
That
had
makes
no idea
sense.
about
I can
that.
see
That's
that, yes.
adorable.
Poor Mike, thank you, Sharon. Prime, RoboCop. I do genuinely like RoboCop 2. Yes, it is kind of a sequel that shouldn't have been made, but it also does make fun of the fact that making a RoboCop 2 is a bad idea. So I have to admire the film's cheek on that note. RoboCop 3, however, is a terrible piece of shit, and that one really should not have been made under any circumstance. So
Now tell us how you feel about the various TV shows, the cartoon where there's a
saw
rapping intro, and there was another cartoon.
Never saw it. Sorry, I got nothing. I actually, RoboCop just came to mind because before the stream I was playing the new RoboCop game, Rogue City, and I quite like it so far. This might be the best piece of RoboCop media ever made since 2, and maybe a few of the video games based on him. So
I will only accept RoboCop the Data East arcade game.
that one's a fun one, yeah.
And
Very
RoboCop 2,
quarter-munchy,
the
but
East arcade game.
No, only the first one.
Not a fan of the
You don't
second
like
one?
the second?
I was never a huge fan.
Okay.
It's a weird
That's
one,
fair.
I'll give you that, yeah.
I like the final boss fight in that, though, how it goes on for like half the game.
Which is exactly how it went on in the movie. So, like, the entire, last 30 minutes is just RoboCop and Kane slugging it out all over the OCP compound. Wow, how did this become a RoboCop stream? Sorry, we should probably move on.
Take it away, Snarb.
Yes,
Yes,
you are up.
Please do.
Well, I will in just a moment. I actually have to take care of something real quick. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
I
I
guess
can go
talk
next
more
then.
RoboCop.
I
Well,
can bring up my game next.
you know what? Since we don't know exactly when Snarp's going to be back, you could do that.
Go for it.
Or we can just
Okay.
BS till he gets back.
Either way, I don't really mind. Like I said, I lost my notes, so it's
Okay.
up to you.
Well, it depends.
Well, yeah, what Snarb was saying about Bubsy 3D makes me think that would have been a good transition to his other game, but I kind of yoinked away the moment to talk about RoboCop, so
Also,
might be.
I just want to say for the record that all those 16-bit mascots, including Sonic, can all go jump on a fire, with two exceptions.
Yeah, well, I know the
Sparkster.
exception. Sparkster, and I can never remember his name, but the High Seas Havoc guy.
Captain Lang.
Lang, gotcha. Like Ant-Man.
Yeah.
About RoboCop, I've only ever seen the first movie, and I do remember loving it, but I also need to rewatch it because I don't remember it that well. But I do happen to own the first RoboCop movie on UMD for
Nice.
the PSP.
Very
And-
nice! Holy shit!
Funnily enough, I got that at a store one day, and it was literally priced for $1. So
Cool.
I bought that for $1.
Thank you, Kate. Excellent.
Nice.
That-
You bought it for $1.
Brava. Yeah, I think that RoboCop still holds up very well today. Like, I don't want to get too political, but I know like opinions on the police nowadays aren't really so hot and whatnot.
But we're not
But
talking
I
about
don't
real
think-
life now, are we?
I do want to say that aside from that aspect, I think RoboCop is a lot more prescient than ever because of corporations taking over everything, even what should be our, like, public institutions. There's a lot to say about the looming threat of OCP and other corporations like it just kind of gaining too much power and doing what the fuck they want to. So, in fact, Snarb and I often grimly joke that we live in basically the exact vision of the future that RoboCop set forth, except that we unfortunately don't even have a RoboCop to protect the downtrodden, so it's even
Came back
worse.
at the best possible time because me and Mike have talked about this so many times.
Yes, I mean, that's exactly what I was saying.
The RoboCop-less dystopia.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know what? The Tigers are playing tonight, and I never miss a game.
How far did the Tigers get in the latest World Series? Oh, Jesus, I'm looking up sports. Snarb, move the fuck on, help me.
Okay, well,
you fly, buddy.
Kurtwood
As-
Smith just fucking stole that movie. He's so good in it.
All right, Snarb, take it away.
All right, so as noted, my next hot take involves a game. Also involves a game that begins with the letter C. In fact, it only begins with the letter C. It is C, the Contra Adventure, or Vitamin C, as I have taken to calling it recently. Now, my hot take with this one, besides it being a great game, is that it's actually the best fully 3D Contra game. And again, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, Snarb. Slow down there for a second. What about Neo Contra or Contra Shattered Soldier? Well, to be fair, these are 3D games, but they are unfortunately restricted to a 2D plane, so they don't count. They have been disqualified from this. That means there are actually only 2, or 3 actually, I forgot about Rogue Corps, fully 3D Contra games. Legacy of War, C, and Rogue Corps. And while we know how good Rogue Corps and Legacy of War are, even though I have a huge soft spot for Legacy of War. So that leaves us with C,
Having
the
flashbacks,
Contra
man.
Adventure. What'd you say, Rob?
I'm having flashbacks, man.
The
Legacy of War.
the Contra table.
Legacy of War. God. Wasted money on that crap.
But
Anyway,
that
go
one
on
is
about
fully
C.
3D, though. You can actually jump in that one, unlike Neo Contra. Although there might have actually been a bit Neo Contra that might have been fully 3D. It's been a while since I played that one, and I never got super far into it. But
There's
Anyway,
one bit
C.
in Neo Contra where you have kind of a side view and you're running on these like alien running animal things, but
Yeah.
I don't think that really counts. Anyways, tell us
Yeah.
about See the Contra Adventure.
Yes, please.
So, See the Contra Adventure was the second Appaloosa-developed Contra game. Now, there's an interesting factoid here that actually ties C to Chakan. Notably, that Appaloosa was formerly known as Novatrade. Novatrade's first game being Echo the Dolphin, which was worked on by one Ed Annunziata, who was the lead designer and producer for the Chakan the Forever Man game. Yeah, so there's a weird roundabout sort of tie here, but unfortunately Ed did not work on this one. This is all Appaloosa's work here. But in any case, they decided to actually get rid of the get rid of the structure from Legacy of War and Hardcore. So you only play as one character, notably Ray. They're still going with Ray in this timeline. And they make the story kind of be a tie back to the original game. There's another asteroid that crashes into the Earth with an evil alien on it, and it's your job to kill it. And what the game ends up being is kind of like a greatest hits mixed with like a fully 3D run and gun. Because the first stage is the side-scrolling stage set in a sort of like a city under siege, like in Contra 3. And then the next few stages take place in a jungle, and then a cave, a temple, a techno base, that kind of thing. But after that first stage, after that first side-scrolling stage, the game introduces the fully 3D portions, and this is where the game loses most people, because I will say that, to be fair to those that hate this game, the camera in this game is not great. It is trying so hard to do things that it should not and cannot do. And I can't fault it too much, because that was a huge problem with a lot of 3D games. And this one was actually trying to keep the Contra spirit intact. It does actually feel like a fully 3D Contra. You get the machine gun, you get the spread gun, you get all of those great little weapons, you get bombs like you do in 3 and Hardcore. And I think Legacy also had that. You've got the spinny jump. You can, yes, you can actually do a spin jump in this game. I think only when you're strafing. I'm kind of losing the plot here. I'm trying to think. I had a point here I was going with. But yes, the 3D stages aren't actually as bad as they first seem. Yes, the camera's a bit weird, but over time you kind of get used to it, and it almost feels kind of like a weird first-person Contra. In fact, when I was playing it, I noted that there were actually a number of sounds that were actually straight from the Quake games, or rather, whatever sound library they used. And the more I thought about it, it's like, the reason I really like this game is it basically feels like someone made a Quake mod called Contra Quake. And like most mods or most sort of, like fan things, this is a huge love letter to Contra, because again, you have to start off with a side-scrolling stage. Then you get sent back to South America, and this time they actually took care to note that, this was in the Yucatan Peninsula or wherever. So you actually end up going to a Mayan temple and other sort of locations like that. It's kind of cool. And, some of the stages, okay, the first stage is the side-scrolling. The next one's a fully 3D sort of stage where you're going to tunnels and stuff, kind of like the behind-the-back bits in the original Contra, mixed in with big, wide open areas. Then there's actually top-down sections that are very similar to the top-down portions in, I think it was, Super C and Contra 3, and, Legacy of War as well, and go figure. And it just keeps doing that. It keeps trying to have all these throwbacks and callbacks and other things. They even bring back some of prior bosses, like that boss from Contra Hardcore that builds stuff out of spheres. They actually bring that back, and they actually upgrade it. It actually feels like these full machines and stuff, tanks, turrets, a giant snake. And they clearly tried with this one in a way they didn't with Legacy of War. They tried to keep it interesting in every stage. They tried to have all these interesting sort of boss fights with multiple stages. They have callbacks in terms of the perspective and stuff. And the more I played the game, the more I really grew to love it. I had played it before as a teenager via Bleem, and I got quite a ways in, but I couldn't remember how far I had gotten. So this past week, I actually started playing the game again. It had been a while, and I actually liked it even more than I did at the time. The more I played it, the more it grew on me. The more it has this sort of weird charm in it. Yeah, it's Jake. The camera's not great. Sometimes the jumping could be a lot better than it is. But it's clear they were actually trying to pay attention and pay homage to, Contra's legacy up to that point, more than the Legacy of War. And the bosses in this game are actually kind of a highlight. There's a lot of cool contrast bosses, even within the first stage. Like there's like a boss rush towards the end of the very first stage on a train, and you're fighting all these different things: turrets, an alien snake, a throbbing alien fetus, the actual engine for the alien train. And from there, you get a bunch of really interesting, weird sort of bosses. Some are cheesy. Like I think at some point you find a bunch of Mayan masks with robot legs, and it's not great. But then there's this other one that's really cool. It looks like a pork chop with spider legs. Like it has these two spiky spider legs, and it just sort of jumps at you and kind of sprays like vomit everywhere. And you're like, okay, this is definitely a Contra boss. Well, you defeat it. It then vomits out an egg, which spawns another half, which combines with it, and it becomes this bigger boss. And then you notice that it had an eyeball on it. And it's spinning around the room, and it's like shooting laser beams at you. It's not actually that hard a boss. In fact, that's kind of the issue with this game, is that outside of the first stage, this game is actually kind of pathetically easy for a Contra game. You get a health bar, so you can take a lot of hits. Your weapons are wiped out at the end of every stage, but on the other hand, they shower you in bombs and really good weapons. So even if you die, you maybe lose a weapon for like a few seconds before you turn a corner and find another one. There are one-ups strewn about through most of the stages. Some have like 2 in them. And that's my biggest complaint with this game, is that it's a little bit easy for a Contra game. And I kind of understand it, like again, they realize probably quickly, okay, we can't do a one-hit kill system here if we're doing behind the back, if we're doing a run-and-gun style of thing here, because you would just be blindsided all the time. And you do get blindsided every so often. But they do take care to try to keep most of what can kill you in front of you. Like, I don't think things actually directly attack you from behind unless you're like a top-down portion or a side-scrolling portion. And I'm not sure what else to say other than I just really appreciate that they keep trying to mix it up with each stage in the game. There's even a bit in this zero-gravity elevator sequence where you're kind of bouncing around almost like a ping-pong ball, but it kind of works in a weird way. And, it's also a boss rush, so you're fighting like alien worms and like robotic turrets, and then there's this giant spider that like slides down behind the elevator, and you have to like shoot its like cores and stuff in a Contra tradition. And then the stage right after that is actually a huge homage to the base stages from the first game, except fully 3D, and there's platforming challenges and all sorts of other things, and it's just a lot of fun. If I had to rate this, though, in terms of the yes, it might be the best fully 3D Contra, but if I had to rate it in terms of tier rankings for the Contra franchise, it's maybe about Contra Force levels of good. I will be frank, it's not the best game ever. I may be the only person that will ever step up to bat for it, but I really like what they were trying to do. They clearly looked at Legacy of War and said, hey, this isn't working. Let's kind of just try to just make Contra the best that we can fully 3D, with the technology that we have. And it works. It actually does work. It actually does feel as close as we could probably ever get to a fully 3D Contra game, more so than Rogue Corps. Rogue Corps was like that felt really weird, if anyone has ever played that. But this actually does get a lot right. Yes, I know you're chuckling there on the Rob. I know you've been waiting this entire time.
Oh no, I was just laughing because I know what Kate thinks of Rogue Corps.
Oh gosh.
We did a Contra roundtable a while back,
Yeah.
I remember that, yes.
So,
man, that game.
Yeah.
So
I feel like I'm the only person that's fully played the game, though. Has anyone else actually played?
I find it interesting to hear that a game apparently past the first stage gets really easy. I'll admit that I've been pretty busy for a while, so when I was preparing for the Contra roundtable, the Contra Adventure was the one that I was least able to put time into. I basically played enough in order to get like some screenshots, and that was it. I did pick up the Contra Adventure again, like within the past day or so, and I do think the first stage is pretty neat. Like, considering the game's reputation, the first stage isn't too bad, but I did end up losing all of my lives multiple times to that final part of the alien train boss, and that part is really brutal. So I would like
Yeah.
to go back to it at some point.
Yeah.
That's my biggest complaint with the game. Is the first stage, it kind of sets it up as being a traditional Contra game, and then you have a health bar, but then for some reason towards the end of the stage, when you get to the train, everything kills you in one hit. They go back to the classic difficulty, and the trick there is to save all of your bombs and just spam one or two of them when you get to the fetus. And then when you get to the engine, I think you might have one more, and that'll knock off half its health. In fact, that's kind of why this game is easy. Yeah, you lose all of your items and weapons at the end of a stage, but on the other hand, they give you like a bunch of bombs, and you can carry up to 5 of them, and you can wipe out most of the bosses in like 2 or 3 seconds because of that. And then you go, there's usually a mid boss, and that acts as a checkpoint, and then you'll pick up more bombs, and by that point you can just wipe out the stage boss, and you're on to the next stage, and you don't carry anything over, so they have to give you all these guns and stuff over again.
To be honest, I forgot that there even were bombs, so I never tried to use any in this stage.
Yeah, this game kind of actually takes it's like an early version of Shattered Soldier in a way, in terms of the way the weapon system works, in that you can carry up to 4 weapons. Now, you don't always have the same set of weapons, throughout the entire game. You can pick up to 4 of them and then cycle through them. But it reminded me of that because you always at least have the machine gun, and the machine gun's pretty good in this game. Spread shot's about what you'd expect. It's been nerfed a little bit, but it's in other ways it works pretty well. And there's also the laser beam, which is really good. There's the homing missiles, which are also good. But they actually introduced this new weapon that I can only describe as a shrapnel shotgun, and it is the most busted thing I have ever seen, at least in some instances. It's not great against bosses because, as you can imagine, they're usually far away, and you can only hit them with 1 or 2 pellets. But when you're going through the top-down stages or the hallway stages, it just bounces off of the walls and everything and just kills everything, and it's great. I wish they would have brought that weapon back for future entries.
I got to say, if I don't mind, there's only one thing I really remember about this game from back when I used to own it and seriously tried to finish it.
Is it the one-liners?
Who's your daddy? I'd rather play
Ticket Please is the one I've heard the most. Actually, he says, Ticket Please?
Which one?
Or something like that. Or, he says either Ticket Please, or he says something like, where's the check, or something like that, or waiter please. I can't remember. There's a bunch of... They give Ray a bunch of really terrible one-liners in this one.
Yeah.
But, that does remind me of a funny note that actually does tie this to Legacy of War. So there were 4 characters in Legacy of War, one of which was called Tasha. I believe she was a cyborg. Well, she actually makes a cameo appearance briefly in a cutscene from first person, she's recording the deep inside of the alien temple, or the alien, heart or core or whatever inside of this Mayan temple, and then she's just killed basically, and that's that. That's how they must have felt about that prior game. That's all the ties they have there.
I hate to be in this mood, but did they have to kill off the woman out of all the characters?
Yeah, that I thought was of course they did that.
Oh,
they could have killed off anybody else or just said it was just some generic person, but they had to specifically target that character.
Yikes.
Actually, Neo Contra does a similar thing now that I think about it, unfortunately, so...
Yeah.
Anyway.
There is actually another disappointment I have with this game. So there's a bit here where you're inside of a foggy cave in the darkness, and sometimes you can only see laser beams in the dark, from turrets and stuff. So it's kind of it's not stealth exactly, but you kind of have a preview of what's ahead, you're looking out for danger and stuff and other things like that. And they don't play Foggy Cave in the Darkness from Hardcores. They play some other generic remix from the other Contra games. The music in this game is actually pretty bad. It's either kind of butt rock mixes of classic Contra tunes or completely original things that are kind of just atmospheric filler kind of things. And then there's the boss tune, which is it's just not great. So yeah, that's the biggest weakness with the game right there. Is the music's not particularly great.
When you said Foggy Cave in the Darkness, I was so looking forward to them using that, but it's a bummer to hear they didn't.
Yeah.
At least there's Contra Rebirth.
Yes.
Yes. I'd still rather play Contra Force.
Ouch.
That's fair. Like I said, it's Contra Force here. If I had to rate it, it's either a little higher or a little lower than Contra Force.
I do want to say we're all big Contra fans here, all four of us. Am I more or less of a fan if I've played this one the least out of all of you?
You're an average fan. Let's be real here. You kind of have to be in a certain mindset to really want to sit down and say, yes, today I am going to play the Contra adventure over every other entry in this franchise.
Yeah, like the one thing we at least seem to agree on is that at least for the stages that play much more like classic Contra, this one maybe sucks a bit less than Legacy of War, which had that, like, bullshit 2.25D perspective that it had running throughout the entire fucking game, or whatever you even call that shit. What do you call that shit?
What I played of the Contra adventure is definitely more enjoyable than Legacy of War.
I
can tell you how I described it in memoirs, Mike.
Yeah, how's that?
Pictured crap.
Well, that's pretty direct, but yeah.
Oh boy.
Like, I will say this though, one bugbear I have with C is that it's too long for a Contra game. I'm looking up a long play of it, and I just, like, wait, should this go like this? And then I looked up a long play of Shattered Soldier, and that lasts, roughly an hour, and that's probably with, the story garnish, which is very skippable. 90... Yeah. So, a little less than an hour for Shattered Soldier. That's maybe a bit longer than prior Contra games, but that's still pretty fair. I saw a long play of the Contra Adventure timed at 96 minutes?
Yes, this is...
fuck?
It took me a little bit longer than that, because sometimes I was like, okay, do I want a game over, or do I want to load from my save? Because this game is very long. The stages, on average, can last between 10 to 15 minutes, especially if they're the behind-the-back view stages, or the fully 3D ones. And, yeah, if you're not ready for that, unfortunately, you can save your game in between stages, but checkpoints are few and far between in stages. In fact, I can't remember... I think stages actually don't even have checkpoints, even after you beat sub-bosses, but I never did fully confirm that. I never usually died after a mid-boss. Usually it was after the mid-boss, so that was like 5 to 7 minutes down the drain.
That sounds like blasphemy to me. Like, the original Contra I've now upgraded to being my favorite game of all time, and part of that is because I can, if I just want a snack of a game, I can whomp it in approximately 20 minutes. Boom, just in, out, done, like that, and I really appreciate that brevity. How the fuck did we get to 96 minutes in this bloated-ass European imitation?
And that's the thing, even compared to other, 3D action games of the era, it's actually pretty short. And again, it's not that hard. Now, I wouldn't sit down and marathon through it, but you could if you got really good at it. But yeah, an hour and 30 minutes is a lot to ask for a run-and-gun game like this.
Yeah.
And you say they only got more bloated from here on out?
Well, after the first stage, yeah, the stages, again, get between 10 to 15 minutes. Some are shorter, like the Zero Gravity Elevator Ride. That one's maybe 5 minutes, depending on how quickly you can deal with the bosses. I think the most egregious example is actually the penultimate stage. I did enjoy that one because, again, it's just a huge homage to the base stages from the original game. But it is long. It's actually probably, I don't clock it, but I bet you it's about 20 minutes. It's a good chunk of the game because you kind of have to slowly go at it, especially since there's those bits where you have to destroy the cores in the wall, and there's dudes running around throwing grenades at you and little spinny bombs and other sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they improved some things from Legacy of War for what it's worth, but the Heretic 2-ass third-person levels, I'm not a huge fan of them. And I did specifically compare it to that just to hawk you off, yes.
Someday I will be able to talk about that game, but that day is not today, sir.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much more to say about it other than maybe I'll play it a bit more someday. If it sucks less than Legacy of War, and Rogue Core, I guess I can at least maybe honor giving it a more earnest shot. But I've got other games to play, and I'm probably not going to go out of my way for this one. You understand, right?
Yeah, like I said, it's fair if I'm the only person in the world that would ever step up to bat for Vitamin C, the Contra adventure.
Calling it that, yeah.
Yes, I do.
All right. So, all that said, Kate, you're up.
All right. I did mention this a bit at the end of the last Hot Takes Roundtable, but my other pick was going to be Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. And that's actually kind of like Ninja Gaiden 3. Donkey Kong Country 3 is another example of a third entry in a trilogy of beloved platformer games where the third entry is a little more maligned compared to the other two. It doesn't have quite as good a reputation, and a lot of people don't seem to care much for it, but honestly, I really adore Donkey Kong Country 3. Personally, I think the entire trilogy is excellent, but Donkey Kong Country 3, I think, is in some ways the most polished and refined experience. I feel like I think all of the games in the trilogy are good. The first game, it sets forth the formula for Donkey Kong Country platformers that would be iterated on in Donkey Kong Country 2. One particular thing that Donkey Kong Country 2 has over the first game is that the boss fights are generally better in 2 than in the first Donkey Kong Country. And then in Donkey Kong Country 3, the boss fights, I think, become even more exciting and interesting. Pretty much every single boss fight in Donkey Kong Country 3 has some kind of interesting gimmick or mechanic that you need to deal with. And I really appreciate that. I think they have some incredibly strong, memorable boss fights there. I do like the overall adventure type feel of Donkey Kong Country 3 with how you still have an overworld and there are still individual sub worlds where you can select stages from, but there's also a little bit of opportunity to check out areas that are not connected to a level, which leads you to a Slammin'-esque mini game. Or there's also a trading system where you're trading items between different people, and it just feels kind of like an interesting sort of adventure type framing around the game. And I think it's a really solid game. Plus, I think it's nice to see Dixie Kong get a starring role in a game after... It's kind of interesting the way that Donkey Kong handles its protagonists, where the first game was Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, and then in the second game, Donkey Kong was captured, so it's now starring Diddy Kong and his girlfriend Dixie Kong. And then in Donkey Kong Country 3, Donkey and Diddy are both missing, so now the protagonist is Dixie Kong, and she's bringing along her little cousin Kitty Kong. So I just think it's a fun experience, and I had a great time playing it. I feel like it has some of the most polished level and enemy design of the series, and it doesn't quite have that epic darker feel that some of the areas had in Donkey Kong Country 2, so it's definitely a somewhat lighter tone, but all in all, it's a great game, and I adore it. I think it's awesome.
Yes, yeah. I actually agree with every word of that, pretty much.
Yeah.
And me as well. I do genuinely think that 3 is a better game than the first one. The first DKC is a little bit tough to go back to. I don't think there's quite as much variety in its levels, and it also kicksparked the fucking why does every goddamn platformer in the 90s need a bullshit minecart level in it trend. So
because
the first
minecart levels rule.
Yeah.
And they are, and to be fair, I think there are minecart levels from what I remember in 3 as well. They're pretty tough too.
All
I
right,
think
well.
the first game had minecart levels, then the second game had it had roller coaster ride
Yeah.
levels, and then the third game had toboggan levels where you're in like a snow area and you're riding
Oh,
that.
right. I
So
guess
it's
those weren't
interesting
bad.
how they have the same mechanic but with a different take on it.
Yeah, I do think that the third game absolutely has more variety than the first, and I'd say it's on par with the second. It's been a while since I played the original DKC games, so I couldn't really compare them more directly next to each other. But I really do remember getting into 3 in the time and wanting to get everything that I could from it to explore the Lost World equivalent or whatever it had.
Kramatoa.
Yes, Kramatoa, exactly. Which was really cool that it had that bonus world like DKC 2 did. Yeah, it really had a really nice aesthetic. It had a bit more of a subdued soundtrack since I believe Evelyn Fisher took over from David Wise full time. But I thought that the sound design was very neat. I thought it looked on par with the prior games, and the innovation of attempting to find everything in each stage was there. And yeah, I do remember the bosses were pretty neat. I liked the snowball fight against the evil snowman. That was like, you learned to do that in one of the prior mini games, and it was sort of an anti-piece for this battle. And I thought that was a pretty neat turn. Also, K. Rool probably has his kookiest persona yet as Baron K. Rulenstein, and that's pretty great. It's kind of funny because like the game makes you think that some sort of weird looking robot by the name of Chaos, Kaos, is the bad guy, but no, Baron K. Rulenstein built him, and it's kind of a funny sort of poke at the whole hijacked by Ganon thing years before that sort of became unironic in that series.
I think it's kind of adorable that K. Rool is so into LARPing.
You're right. You're right. Yes, exactly. And it's he nails the mad scientist thing pretty well to his credit. I thought it cool that like you got like different methods to travel on the water. I thought that I actually liked playing Simon Says to get all the banana birds. I distinctly remember back in the day that like the one bear said something about like swimming between those rocks, and I thought as a kid, what, do I swim in the figure 8 pattern? Is that what I have to do? And like the thing that it unlocked when he did that didn't goddamn unlock. Turns out I did have to do it, but more than once, and I felt kind of peeved at that. It is a little bit obtuse in a few areas, but it's really not much worse than the past couple games in that. If anything, I do think it is more gracious, at least than the first game. Yeah, again, it's been a while since I played 3. I couldn't tell you if I like it more than 2, but I'd say it is as good, if not better. Will admit, I hate to back to the popular opinion. Will admit, not the hugest fan of Kiddy Kong. I don't mind him. I don't exactly love him. It's fair that this is the only game that he was in it for.
He's okay.
Yeah, he's okay, absolutely. I will admit, for the many, many criticisms you can levy against Donkey Kong 64, I do think Chunky Kong was a better take on what they tried to go with for Kiddy Kong, so there is that. But
Kiddy Kong only cries if you lose a life, and that only happens if you're bad at the game.
That's not as bad. That's not as bad as Yoshi's Island. I will give you that.
Yes. Well, I have a question here for anyone, really. Have any of you played it in co-op? Because I have with my partner, and it's a really great experience. Like, I know you can play with any of them, but it's just really good because the stages have very tight timing in some of them, like especially the factory stages, where you have those owls chasing after you with the cannons. That's just such a highlight to the game to me, is how well-designed and challenging the game is, but you quickly figure it out, and it sort of unravels. It's not quite a puzzle platformer, but it's just very well designed, and it shines especially in co-op where you have to sort of coordinate everything.
I did actually get to play a bit of Donkey Kong Country 3 in co-op with a friend several years ago. I was over at his house and we were playing Donkey Kong Country 3. I was Dixie and he was Kitty. And one particular thing about this game and also Donkey Kong Country 2 is that your partner Kong can like pick you up and you have like a different effect based on whether it's like Dixie like being picked up by Kitty or Kitty being picked up by Dixie. So if Dixie picks up Kitty, then Dixie can throw Kitty since Kitty is larger and Kitty will break a cracked bit in the floor and open up a secret area. But if Kitty throws Dixie, then Kitty can throw Dixie really far and get across up to a higher platform. So my friend was trying to throw me as Dixie onto the higher platform so we could get up there, but unfortunately he didn't do it right, and then Dixie was just left up there and I couldn't play anymore for the next bit. So that was a bit annoying, but oh well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not always perfect. The game, in terms of the co-op, me and my partner definitely ran into issues with it every so often. But it's a very pleasant game to play. I agree with you. I like the adventure sort of theme. I like the overworld, how it's more fleshed out and you actually travel along it. It also has sort of a strong summer camp theme to it, and for whatever reason, I'm a huge sucker for that in media. Like, I love Psychonauts. That's one of my favorite games. So to have a Donkey Kong Country game that does that, it's such a good feeling.
Totally.
Yeah, sadly, lone wolf as I am, I never played in co-op, but I do quite like it for what it is. I remember it had the cheek to have a swimming level where the water was foul and your controls were reversed. I actually always kind of liked that because wow, that's a crazy thing curveball to throw at you this late in the game. I know that some people think it's kind of bullshit and fake difficulty, but it's not that bad. Yeah, I think it's pretty neat. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, DKC 3, really, I think, is certainly overlooked. Anyone who, is like, oh, the first two games were good, 3 wasn't that great. Fuck you, because I really do think it's legitimately better than the first, and I think it's kind of hard to argue against that, just due to all the technical improvements it makes.
I will say that the first game is still enjoyable. I think it's kind of comparable to Super Mario Brothers, where the original sets the formula, and in its own right is still a really fun, enjoyable experience. And even if it's not quite as flashy or as varied as later games, I still think it's solid and fun to go back to.
Well, y'all know my thoughts on Super Mario Bros. 3 and Dyer's thoughts, but I do get that comparison for what it's worth. Speaking of, Rob, I'm sure you have zero horse in this race, but any comments?
I do have a couple comments, actually.
Are they nice?
Well, you be the judge.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, you should all know how I feel about 90s platformers. Not a fan. It kind of falls in with the whole mascot platformers thing. It takes something special for one to really stand out and get my attention and make me say, hey, I gotta play this. And admittedly, I've only played the first game in the series. And much like everyone else, I was suckered into like, wow, that looks amazing. At the time, honestly, it did. And then I played it. And yeah. And at that point, I pretty much decided I didn't want to waste any more time with Rare's Donkey Kong fanfiction, so I moved on.
Ouch. Mm-hmm. I also know that our friend Scroll Boss is not a huge DKC fan. Prime, if you are there, sir, would you care to tell us why that is? Because I will never get tired of it. But yeah, go on, Rob, while he responds.
I saw the other two come out. I was like, nope, no interest. No, thank you. I'm done.
That's fair.
And then, you know, I never bought another Nintendo console after the Super NES, so I never bothered with any of the other ones.
I will say this, I know how mortally opposed you are to collectathons, and yeah, that is undeniably kind of a factor in the DKC SNES games. Not to mention that Donkey Kong 64 dove bull fucking torpedo Mach 13 head for shit into the whole collectathon thing, and it is even collectathonier than the Banjo-Kazooie games. It's kind of impressive, but everyone who liked Banjo-Kazooie thought they were too much. I should know, man. I fucking 101%ed that shit. I don't know why.
You sick
I just
bastard.
I know. I'm ashamed of myself. What's wrong with me?
I will say that as someone who tends to not like collectathon-focused games or gameplay or game design in general, I think the Donkey Kong Country trilogy is really fun. There is a collecting aspect, but it doesn't overshadow the games by any means, and they're still fun to play even if you ignore that. So I feel like it's just fun to have as an extra thing that you can engage in if you want, but it's not necessary.
That is fair. And yes, Scroll Boss, I did have to make you type digital mudbud. I thought it was only fair. Thank you. Thank you so much for fulfilling that wish.
Oh,
anyway.
Is that in relation to the graphics? Because I have my own term for that era of CGI graphics that I'm sure you're familiar with, Mike.
You'll have to remind me, sir.
CGI turds.
That is correct, yeah.
Yep.
I think
that weird
that, you know...
to it.
Now, I think, to be fair, that DKC as a game does look better than most of the CGI at the time. However, and I can't believe I'm bringing this up again, but I believe there was a short-lived, like I did for Bubsy, I forget if it was a pilot or if it did actually have a few more episodes, but there's a short-lived animated series based on Donkey Kong Country. That looked like mud-butt CGI turd-butt fuckery, what have you, as I remember.
It looks really bad, and it's like it was competing against like Reboot and Beast Wars and stuff like that, which looked much better. I mean, they weren't great either.
Well, didn't Donkey Kong make like an unironic prototype Pogger's face at some point, or am I hallucinating?
I think you are correct, yes. They did
Jesus
some interesting things with the facial like features and like the expression. I will give it credit for there. It is definitely a very silly, kind of hilarious thing to go back to.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look this up now, Donkey. You all go ahead. Sorry, Kay, we kind of stole your thunder. Again, I do really like DKC 3. I just had to throw a little shade at it.
Yeah,
very
I don't have anything else to say. I already said my piece about how much I love the game.
So I have two things to add. One being that if I'm going to give Donkey Kong Country points about anything, it's only one thing.
Aquatic ambience.
Damn right. That is an incredible piece of music.
That song is fantastic, and yeah, the music in this series is really great, if nothing else. Of course, 2 does have the almighty Forest Interlude and Sticker Brush Symphony, if you haven't heard those. Again, 3's soundtrack doesn't get talked about as much because Evelyn Fisher did it and not David Wise, but I think there's a lot to like in it. I especially remember liking the factory theme. It sounded really dramatic for its time, and
I think Evelyn Novakovic's work is really great. I love the Cascade Capers theme in particular. It's one of my favorite pieces of music in the 16-bit era. Very atmospheric. It plays in the waterfall stages.
Oh yeah, now I'm going to have to give it a listen again. It's been some time, but yeah, no, I totally agree. Very underrated. Just as one more note, my friend Andrew isn't a huge fan of the original SNES trilogy, but he really likes Returns and he loves Tropical Freeze. So, I don't know, Dyer, if you'd like those games more, but I'm sure you're probably not going to play them anytime soon. Just mention them.
But okay. The other thing I wanted to say is, though, it's like Donkey Kong Country 3. No, I'm going with Donkey Kong 3. Give me Stanley the Bugman or give me death.
Donkey Kong 3 is not a bad game at all. In fact, I do genuinely like the the catch of it for some reason. Some brain genius at Nintendo thinking that, the future of video gaming was shooting pesticides up a giant monkey's asshole. So there is that.
I do find Donkey Kong 3 interesting because it's basically Galaga as a platformer.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of the reason I like it so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
Galaga as a platformer.
Yeah, it's a bizarre experiment of a game, and I do admire it for that. Anyone remember that one weird PC port of it that had these very creepy-looking photorealistic stages in the background?
Vaguely.
I think I remember seeing something about it.
Yeah.
Was that actually officially what's it, an official game, or was it like a game inspired by Donkey Kong 3?
I think it was official, but it was part of the same deal that got us Super Mario Brothers Special or whatever. I don't remember. This is something I'd have to look up to be sure.
I will say something. Over the past couple of years, I've actually had a chance to play the original arcade version of Donkey Kong 3.
Oh?
And I have to say the NES port is really well done in comparison. It's
Nice.
Sure, the arcade one looks a little cleaner. It's got that whole, higher resolution because being an arcade game and all that. But the NES port is extremely faithful.
Good stuff.
So, that's it. I think
Okay,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually see now what Mike was talking about with the realistic backgrounds in the PC-88 version and the other. This one especially is very creepy. There's these 5 aliens that just have
that's the one I was thinking
fixed.
of. That sounds like some sort of fucking bullshit prototype creepypasta thing. I don't know. It's so weird. How does this exist? But yeah.
All right, so finally we're back to me. The other game I'm going to defend, and now keep in mind I am biased towards this game, but I'm trying to put that aside and be objective here. But the game still gets talked crap about to this day, though I've heard a lot more people say how much they actually like it. But I'm talking about Splatterhouse 2010.
I still need to play that. I've been eyeballing 360 prices and a copy of that game on eBay, and it's someday I will pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Well, just looking at what the pros of the game is here. It's if you're a fan of the original games, it does pay them proper homage. There's little bits of all of them scattered throughout it. The voice acting is really good.
It is. They had several professionals on there. Of course,
Jim
Josh
Cummings.
Keaton, Samel Workman, and Jim Cummings is absolutely the... they got Winnie the fucking Pooh just spouting out all sorts of profanities and trolls to his host all throughout the game, and it is peak. I love it.
He was also the master in the original Fallout.
Absolutely, yeah. He's had a shitload of roles throughout the years. He was Pete from the Goofy series, right?
Yeah, he was Darkwing Duck too, if I remember correctly.
You're right, he was. So, yeah, goddamn legend they got for this unlikely cult game that ostensibly he doesn't remember so well, but, it is what it is.
Did you know, I like the fact that when they finally gave the Terror Mask a voice, they not only made it evil, but they made it evil and snarky.
Yeah, exactly.
It's snarky in the main games, though, or the original 3, if you notice, if you pay attention to how it speaks to Rick. So that's a very nice touch that they brought that forward.
Mm-hmm.
We can save her, Rick, or something like that.
It's what do I want? Same as any other god. Little faith. It's about faith. I am nothing. And without me, you're fucked.
It's pretty astounding, yeah. It's
such a great line.
It really is.
And, as much as people can complain about the camera in there, I found the camera to be pretty easy to control. And it doesn't, go wacky. And I think the controls are really good as well. Rick's responsive. You press a button, something's going to happen. Usually what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
So, And the story, it's a nice, basically retelling of the original Splatterhouse. And I forget exactly who it was that did the writing duties on that one. Somebody who was pretty famous, if I remember correctly, in his field. And
It was a comic writer, wasn't it?
Yes.
It wasn't Mike Mignola, was it? Probably not.
No.
Okay.
No, not Mike Magnola.
I'm way off. Fuck, I can't remember either.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And despite the fact that people have had a tendency to dismiss it as a one-note button masher, honestly, if you button mash, you are going to die.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And the amount of moves you have is almost staggering. So many different things you can do in that game.
Yeah, I remember...
Mm-hmm.
Like, my favorite thing about it was that, Rick has a sort of gore system where as he gets... He has, like, giga super... like hyper Wolverine-esque healing to such a ridiculous extent that he can get his limbs severed, but then he regrows it, and then he can pick up his own prior severed limb and use it as a weapon, which is pretty fucking amazing, I gotta say.
Now, I will say there are a few cons to it as well. Now, one thing I was told when the game was coming out is that all of the QuickTime events had been removed. This was not the case. They might have been scaled back from what they were going to be originally, but they're still there. So
because that was the thing at the time, wasn't it?
Exactly. Now, there's also the occasional game-stopping bug. And this has more to do with the development history of the game than anything else. Because it switched dev teams a couple of times. And a lot of the stuff that should have triggered certain events and whatnot was left unfinished. And somehow that affected what happens in the game sometimes. And basically, there's a lot of unattached code in that game. And it does occasionally to a game-stopping bug, like I said. It's apparently a little more prevalent in the PS3 version than the 360 version.
Yeah, I remember reading recently that that it was designed for the 360 foremost. The PS3 one was it wasn't as bad a port job as Bayonetta apparently was, but it was the inferior version. Unfortunately, it was the version I played, but I don't remember having many problems with it, if any. So I don't know.
I got the 360 version on day one. I can only remember the game actually stopping on me twice, and it really hasn't done it since.
Oh, great.
And the big thing that bugs me is that even though they knew the future of the series was dependent on the success of this game, maybe Namco believed their own hype a little too much. They made announcements before the game came out saying that the game was going to sell 1 million copies. It was going to do this kind of, business and so on and so forth. So the team left it off on a cliffhanger ending, thinking that, yes, we would definitely be coming back to do a sequel. Then there was a shakeup at Namco Bandai Japan, and the new president didn't like American devs, so on and so forth, and basically pulled all the funding for the game at a critical moment when it needed it.
Yeah.
And as such, the critics savaged it. People wanted more open world sandbox kind of stuff, and it was kind of a clusterfuck in the end.
Yeah, this is a hot take stream. I want to say this. Cliffhangers fucking suck. Don't do them. Ever.
No.
Ever. Fucking ever. Like, I say this despite, Star Trek Next Generation and the Best of Both Worlds being a thing. Still, not every... Don't gamble. Like...
I think cliffhangers can be awesome.
Too many TV shows whose futures were in question did leave off on a season with a cliffhanger, only to be canceled. So,
Dr. Sam Beckett never returned.
I was going to say.
Thank you.
I think the blame there is not on the writers per se.
No, definitely.
I mean, it's not. It's on the dick-headed executives who can just yank the show on a whim because it's not profitable. I'm going to slap my dick in the table and throw my money everywhere. But the fact that, unfortunately, the writers realize that these helicoptering suit and tie fuckfaces exist, I do think that they do have to sort of work with the fact that at any moment the stool can be kicked out from under them. So I don't know. I guess it depends on the success of the media in question, and how well the writers can read the room. Hence, I mean, you're not wrong, Kate. It isn't really the writer's fault per se, but all the same, I do also think that it's.
I understand your frustration.
Yeah. I mean, Mega Man Legends 2. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, no,
he's just chilling on the moon. He's not having a bad time, Mike. He's okay.
I still say fuck Capcom after all these years.
I don't want to say fuck absolutely. Capcom per se. Fucking Afune, though. I don't like that guy anymore.
I don't think he's to blame for Legends not getting a continuation.
Okay, he's not entirely to blame. There were a lot of, eaters of the shit sandwich in that whole deal. He was only a part of it. I'll give you that. But anyway, we are hijacking Rob's diddly-do. I apologize.
Yeah, stop hijacking the Capcom talk.
I did get to try some of the Splatterhouse 2010 game. I got a 360 copy earlier this year. I have not had time to finish it because I've been busy, but I played through the first 2 or so chapters, I think. Honestly, I wasn't really that into it. I remember finding the combat kind of clunky and frustrating to control. I didn't like how many QTEs there were in the game, and the overall writing and tone of the game felt kind of off-putting to me, and I just wasn't really having a great time with it. And another thing kind of related to the QTEs, although I can't really blame the game per se on it, is that there was this one QTE during the second stage boss where you had to mash the B button, but my 360 controller's B button was stuck. So no matter how hard I was pressing it, it would not register correctly. So I had to literally stop the game in order to open up my controller and clean out the B button. So that was really frustrating. But I can't blame that on the game. But yeah, I will probably go back to finish it at some point, but I'm not having a great time with it so far.
Well, you do have some valid points there. And to be honest, the last few stages do get a little repetitive. Enemy variety kind of dries up. And the last boss is odd, to say the least.
It's not even really a boss.
Yeah.
Like, I am aware that the game had a rough development history, that the developers and writers aren't to blame for what happened behind the scenes.
Honestly, it's amazing it turned out as well as it did.
Yeah, it's amazing it got released at all, frankly. Holy shit.
That too.
It's a minor miracle, and, well, I mean...
It does have the free Splatterhouse games as unlockables.
You're welcome.
Cool, yes. You're welcome. He says... So
it was your idea to have them do that?
Actually, I pitched for it. I actually went right to one of the producers, Dan Tovar, and I was like, you guys have to include the original Splatterhouse trilogy, all the original Splatterhouse games, as a thank you to the fans who've been waiting so patiently for a new game. And Dan's like, okay, we'll see what we can do. And he basically came back to me and said, okay, this is after a few weeks. He's like, we were able to get all of them included, except for one Paku Graffiti. It didn't fit the tone. It's like, oh,
alas.
Okay, but so he's like, yeah, there were a few problems, though. He's like, the guys at the top were really pushing for the 3 original games to be paid DLC.
Oh my gosh.
Really? I don't think I knew that. That
Oh,
fucking
yeah.
blows ass.
But Dan really went to bat for making them included as bonuses for the fans.
Thank you, Dan.
That's pretty awesome.
Thank you, Dan.
And thank you
Jesus
for
fuck.
proposing that idea.
Indeed.
Hey, it's a lot of people have cited this as the reason to own the game. And, well, I think it's kind of a short-sighted thing. At the same time, shows they appreciate the classics. So, can't really fault them on that.
Yeah.
It's
and
probably
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's probably the most... Well, prior to the recent Switch release and whatnot, it was the most accessible way to officially access the arcade version of Splatterhouse.
Yeah, it was the first time it was available outside arcades in America. Not counting the TurboGrafx port. All the other, pretty darn close to arcade perfect ports were only released in Japan.
Sometimes Marty.
Yep, and Windows.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't know it was on Windows.
Yes, there is a Windows release.
Nice.
Crazy.
Weird. I was going to say, though, it kind of related to what Kate was mentioning, is that it's the cheapest way you can own Splatterhouse 3.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And unless you get 3 other good games to go with it, well, depending on how you feel about it. I haven't played it yet, so I can't speak.
Well,
Sure.
again, trying to be as unbiased as possible, but I like the game. So,
I'm glad you enjoy it.
and I will also say that there was a few changes made to Splatterhouse 3 on that subject, though. You're not getting the exact same game that you would have got if you had the original cartridge.
Is it censored?
Not censored.
Okay.
It's more of a likeness rights issue. Because the original game used digitized images for the cutscenes, featuring real people.
Oh.
So those
I see.
contracts expired years ago.
Oh, right.
I didn't realize that. You'd think it would be in perpetuity kind of thing, but
In fact, I had posted, I believe it might have been on West Mansion, there was an entire piece I put together showing the differences between the two of them. Let me check.
Nice.
that's fascinating.
If I find it, I'll post the link in the chat.
Has a
Sounds good.
version of that
Got
ROM
it.
been dumped, I wonder?
Not that I'm aware of.
Hmm.
But here, I'll go ahead and post that in the chat for everyone to check out.
Okay.
Serving it up right there. So yeah, take a look. Tell me what you think.
Oh, they redrew it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It actually doesn't look too bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
they came
Uh-huh.
pretty close. The one that got me the most was the Jennifer becomes a mindless beast scene.
That one's a
Yeah.
little cheesy, yeah, unfortunately.
Not as horrifying as the original, which still horrifies me to this day, but it is what it is.
I remember when I ran the West Mansion Facebook page, I just posted that image one day without a comment. And a couple people were like, geez, I was scrolling to my feed and all of a sudden that popped up and scared the crap out of me.
Nice.
A literal jump scare. Well, anyway, Rob, you got more you want to say about it? Because I have some things I can, as you well know.
Oh yeah, you know where I stand. Even trying to discount my own personal involvement with the game, if I had just bought it and played it, I probably would enjoy the hell out of it. Just like some other horror games for the 360 I've played, like Onichan Bar or Lollipop Chainsaw.
Mm-hmm.
So
I will say that I like it more than One-chan Bara.
that game's just a goof.
I don't know how I would compare it against Lollipop Chainsaw, but I'll refrain from final judgment until I finish the game.
Okay, but yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I also do have a stake in Splatterhouse 2010 since my name is in the ding dang credits, so I don't want to sound too
Both of
biased towards it as well. But it's a sloppy game. It certainly ain't perfect, but I like the style, how unashamedly grindhouse it was, how amusing, the dialogue. I guess maybe some would say it's maybe a little bit Whedon-y at points today, which I kind of curl just even saying that, but for what it was at the time, I think it worked quite well with the overall vibe. I was fascinated enough to want to keep playing in to see what was next, and it's been a while. I couldn't really tell you the extent of Rick's terror abilities, aside from like new combo strings and like weird new mutations he can do with his body. I just mostly remember the use your own severed limb as a club or even blade sort of thing. I think he got like Baraka-esque arm blades at some point, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong.
That's when you go into the Berserker mode.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I remember Hoogerbrug being made back in the day. There's this one large demon mid-boss who you executed by pulling its intestines out of his ass or something grotesque like that. A very Stuart Gordon or Brian Usna-esque move there, but...
Yeah, the frog dog, I always called it.
Yeah. The game definitely knew what it was, and I admired it because of that. There were some other games at the time, because it's like, it felt like around this time, gaming in general was kind of having an identity crisis, and that goes doubly so for many of the old IPs that had survived long enough to that point. It kind of felt like that, some longtime games were degrading a bit from where they originally came from, because just last year, before Splatterhouse 2010, Resident Evil 5 was released to mixed opinion of how, RE4 did action horror right. 5 felt like it was being too much more action-y, to the detriment of how the horror side of things. And you had that really shitty failed Golden Axe reboot, which we will never speak of again. I'm sorry. Yeah, that fucker. I'm sorry I mentioned it.
Splatterhouse turned out way better than that.
It absolutely did. Yeah, like I said, and that's why I like Splatterhouse 2010, because it could be worse, and it was worse for several series around this time. I mean, the year prior. A game that I like considerably less, but I also think had potential and was at points fun. Released the year before Splatterhouse was the Bionic Commando reboot. I thought that game had some potential. I actually did have fun enough bionicking my way around the open environments, and I think with some polish and more time in the oven, it could have been quite good. I mean, I'm not a fan of Spencer's, growly new metal ass remake, and of course the 11th hour plot twist is sadly the only fucking thing anyone brings up about the game anymore.
That story was asinine.
It's terrible, it's stupid, I can see why that's the only reason why anyone remembers it, but at the same time, it also pisses me off because I think it's overlooking that the game did have some fair qualities, but...
I do find that twist really hilarious in kind of a pervy way.
I did too, to an extent. I mean, it's... I think it is genuinely funny. It's just... Also, why did we even do this? Why are we here? What is this anymore? There's also that sort of undercurrent running about it, but...
Yeah.
I mean, there's another game I want to bring up, but it might be petty, and since I know that someone else here considered talking about it tonight, I'm not sure if I should bring it up.
Which one?
Yeah, which one, Mike?
Snarb, that would actually be one that you contemplated. I don't know if I have your permission to discuss it or not.
Yeah, I can just say it. Lords of Shadow.
Oh, God.
Which was released the same year as Splatterhouse 2010, and which is, by technical definition, a more polished and refined game. But unlike Splatterhouse 2010, it really does not have an identity of its own, so I can't say I like it as much. because it doesn't feel so much like Castlevania as it does like, generic-ass medieval European fantasy game that feels much more like God of War and, to a lesser extent, Shadow of the Colossus than it does Castlevania. Like, I want to like that game more, but as a very staunch, almost borderline purist Castlevania fan, there's just a lot about it that greatly irritates me. And I guess I do also have some personal vendetta against it because it really clobbered Splatterhouse 2010 in the reviews at the time, and I'm like, people thought this was a good game, that this would be the future of Castlevania. And sadly, it was, and that gave us Lords of Shadow 2, which by then everyone realized, oh no, wait, this sucks. It ain't fucking shit so badly that it killed off the fucking series, so way to go, you stupid brain genius dickweeds. I can say that a sequel to Splatterhouse 2010 would have been better than that, crystal vomit barfing pile of shit was. Yeah, I know. Maybe this is a bit of a...
Okay. I don't know if I can defend the second one, and to be fair, I still need to get further in. I think I only got about 8 to 10 hours into Lords of Shadow, but that is something I would like to revisit. We'll see if my opinion holds up. But if there's another hot take that I'm on, maybe we'll see.
Mm-hmm. I'd prefer never talk about that game again. So, all right. So
I'm not even going to give you the line on this. I mean, my thoughts are not as hateful of yours on Lords, but they are extremely mixed, and I just find it a shame that, like, Castlevania kind of sold its identity to the devil just to get good reviews for what overzealous game journos thought was a good game during the 7th gen. While Splatterhouse, trouble development aside, for the most part, I feel that it didn't compromise identity. It stuck to its guns, and it, unfortunately, ate shit in the greater, public eye because of it, but I do have to respect that it did what it did, and, it's just a shame that other people didn't agree, but I guess Splatterhouse has always kind of been a pretty cult series anyway, so I guess that's just as well in line that the modern attempted revival of it would also be consigned to that status.
Yeah.
Although I will say, though, that... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Finish that.
I will say that for as much as I like the game, I do have to admit, after Stage 8, it does get warbly. You can see where they ran out of time and budget. Like the last real unique boss fight was against Rick, who gets promoted to full-time boss at the end of Stage 8, and it is badass. It is an amazing fight. And in retrospect, I wonder if it should have been the final boss, because I don't think there were any more unique bosses afterward. The last 4 levels just kind of feel like retreads that bring back, prior bosses as larger enemies or whatever. And there's that one somewhat frustrating, you have to kill these enemies in a short amount of time segment in Stage 10. And of course, I can't even really call the final boss much of a boss at all, which I am still very sad about.
You did bring up an interesting point.
What's that?
Because of the change in studios and everything that happened, the team was actually in a crunch. The game was supposed to be released in 2009. But
that makes sense.
Because Bottle Rocket went and screwed everything up, and they had to go and basically tear out as much as they could, the stuff that was very non-Splatterhouse, and try to make a decent game out of it. They only had not even a year to do it. So I'm not surprised that what happened at the end happened at the end. With
look, I feel like an asshole saying that any game company should be deceased, especially in this era of a year of really fucking terrible layoffs. But, Bottle Rocket deserved to die for how much they fucked with that, and I'm sorry. It's just, it still pisses me off to think about.
It was also 13 years ago, Mike.
That's another good point. You've more or less moved on. I admit, childish as I am, I still get a little bit of twinge thinking of a twinge thinking about if this game was better, maybe me and you could have had more clout in the game industry somehow. I don't know if that's just a small name, big ego sort of thing, but I guess it's a little bit of a sour grape that I still have in my mouth. Although that being said, a point I do also sometimes make is that for as vicious as the fucking industry is nowadays, maybe we dodged a bullet after all. I don't know.
Yeah. Besides, I wouldn't gonna. Knowing now what I know then, I'm glad I never gave him my baby.
Exactly.
You know
and
what
also,
I'm talking about.
Do I? Shit. I'm sorry. It's getting late.
I'll give you a hint. It has the initial COTR.
You're right. Oh, yeah, right. You were in a possible... That's right. Yeah, yeah. That would be for the best.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it. Zafiro, however, notes that the Lords of Shadow developers did go on to make Samus Returns and Metroid Dread, and to Mercury Steam's credit, those games are actually very good. So, A, they might have honed their craft more since then, B, they've settled into a type of gameplay that works better than them, and C, frankly, I don't want to seem like I'm sucking Nintendo's dick here, but I think it would be better to work under Nintendo's guidance than Konami's if you want a good game made, so...
That's granted. That's pretty obvious.
Pachinko.
Yeah, them and their fucking fitness clubs or whatever Yakuza-ass ventures they had. And I don't know. I don't want to get into that.
Nintendo generally is pretty good at maintaining a certain vision and concept for their games, and even when working with third parties, they manage to keep it coherent. There really aren't too many examples of Nintendo having a third-party developer work on one of their mainline series and having it turn out to be a disaster in the way that you often hear about these collaborations working out.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, hell, I mentioned Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze earlier, and those are done by Metroid Prime
party developer, though.
Oh, they are? Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I'm stupid. Never mind.
Second party, maybe. Whatever they call it these days. There might be one exception.
It became a first-party studio in 2002. Nintendo bought them.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
My bad. Womp womp.
I was going to say, though, there might be one Nintendo co-developed game that might actually live up to the ire, and that's Metroid Other M.
Oh yeah. The baby!
Yes.
The baby!
I would actually want to go into more of that at some point, because I do own a copy, and I actually played it for the first time this year or last year. And but that will have to be saved for another time.
Baby.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The babby.
How is
when the babby can't strict back?
God fucking damn it.
Babby alien.
Yep.
Why can't Metroid crawl?
Oh dear.
We are bringing back the internet. Here's a hot take. The internet was a mistake. I'll shut up now.
If the internet wasn't around, then we wouldn't be here doing this right now.
Okay, fine. You got me there.
Burned, Mike. You've been burned.
I wish we had like something in the soundboard that was like a stock fire sound or something like that.
Yeah.
That'll have to do.
I'll give you this one.
Fire! Oh wow! Hey, added Mario.
All right, who just did that?
That was me.
Oh, thank you, Kate.
Sure. I happen to have a nitro trial at the moment.
Excellent.
All right, so I think with all this, we're going to call it a night.
Sounds good.
I've actually been up since 7 a.m., so...
Oh, dang.
Yeah, well, we had a long drive to get out to Free Play, Florida, so...
I'm glad you had a good time there.
Oh, yeah, it was great. So... But I won't be going to another of these for at least another year, so... That's if I go next year. We don't know yet. So, anyway. That said, you can expect another stream coming up soon. Don't know what it's going to be yet. We haven't made that decision, but we got a few irons in the fire. And you will see another hot take stream at some point.
Nice.
So, thank you all for joining us tonight. Glad you all could be here. Nice seeing so many familiar faces out there. And, or would that be familiar usernames? I don't know. I'm tired.
Thank you all for joining us.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great having you all. I don't think I read the chat quite as much this time, so sorry, because I'm usually pretty active on that. But thank you all so much for sitting in and listening to our weird bullshit for our happy hot take stream. If we do another one of these, I don't think it's going to be as universally positive across the board, so be warned.
Yeah, it's going to be a mix, I think, more likely.
Absolutely.
So, you want to add anything before we leave, Snarb?
Other than thanks for everybody joining us. No, I can't think of anything. This was a nice roundtable, and it was fun talking about all these games. So I hope everybody else enjoyed it just as much as we did.
All right. I'm with you there. So, all right. We will catch you guys next time. Everybody have a fun.
Enjoy.
Good night, everybody.